All right, we're going to get started on day 22. This is the second to the last day. We've been through thousands of pages if you add them all up. This particular file is 172 pages. Anchorage, Alaska, Wednesday, June 13th, 2012. Call to order of the dishonorable court at 8:49 a.m. Defendants present, jury not present. The clerk, all rise. His dishonorable, deaf, and senile, the court, the United States Dishonorable Court, is again in session. Please be seated. Here's the original instructions. The clerk, thank you. The court. Okay, who's opening for the plaintiff? Mr. Scrocky, all right. I have my eye on the clock to some extent here. I anticipated a 1 hour lunch, but rather than an hour... I anticipated a 1 hour lunch rather than an hour and a half lunch today, and hopefully we'll be able to break right at noon. Okay, bring the jury in, please. Jury present at 10:25 a.m. The court, Ms. Klein. PH, it's okay if you take one of these reserved seats up here. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now please give your attention to Mr. Scrocky and may present argument on behalf of the plaintiff, United States. Thank you, Your Honor, Mr. Scrocky. Mr. Scrocky, may it please the court, counsel, members of the jury, good morning. The clerk, Mr. Scrocky, I can't hear you, thank you. Mr. Scrocky, how about that? The clerk, much better, thank you. Mr. Scrocky, good morning. On behalf of the United States prosecution team in this case, Sean Robinson, our computer driver, Yvonne Lamoureux, my colleague, and Rick Sutherland of the FBI, like to thank you for the attention that you've given us through the course of this case, for your dedication and your patience and your time you've given. In fact, all of us during the presentation of the evidence in this case. The reason that we're here this morning is because of the acts of three men, Coleman Barney, Lonnie Vernon, and Francis Schaefer Cox. The reason we're here this morning is because you've seen over the past 6 weeks evidence that these three individuals are working on a plan. They're working on another form of government. And in the long term, we're not telling you that it was going to happen today and it was going to happen tomorrow, that it was going to happen next week. But the fact of the matter is, this whole case is about when we're going to be strong enough. The fact of the matter is, today, you know, from the evidence that we've presented, Mr. Cox possessed a machine gun. Mr. Cox wanted grenades. Mr. Cox had a silenced pistol. Mr. Cox had a militia. A lot of other entities he was using to upswell his stock in Fairbanks. And he was doing it to form the sovereign republic of Schaefer Cox. That fact, we submit, is indisputable. Now, I want to tell you why as we go through this. We're going to go through the timeline I have up on the chart there and the evidence that we presented, and then go talk about the instructions and the elements. By the time I'm done with this part of my presentation, you'll be firmly convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that all three defendants are guilty of all the crimes charged beyond a reasonable doubt. Let's take a look at March the 10th of 2011, okay? We have three members of the Alaska Peacemakers Militia. We have as Commander Schaefer Cox. We have as Major Coleman Barney. And we have the Sergeant Lonnie Vernon. What are they doing on March the 10th? Are they working in the soup kitchen somewhere helping out people? Are they at the Alaska Pioneers home helping out people? Are they working with the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts on some sort of civic project to do good? Absolutely not. You know what they're doing that day? They had in their hands one of these each and a spool of these each. Now take a step back for a second, just think about that. When's the last time any of you held something like this in your hand? When is the last time somebody like yourself held something like this in your hand that would have been a live hand grenade? These three guys were handling these things like they were common, ordinary items. Not a problem in the world. Now on March the 10th, you know, that's when the investigation ended, at least as far as the operational side, the tactical side of the investigation. What happened up before that? So we have to take a step from March the 10th. We're going to go back to August of 2009, and that's where you get inside look for the beginnings of the inside look of the Alaska Peacemakers Militia. The outside look that they wanted you to see, and then you wanted the people of Fairbanks to see, rather doing civic work, we're smiling for the camera, doing all these great things. When you get the inside look, though, Mr. Olson's work, we talk about him in just a second. You get a different picture, right? We get this commissioning ceremony at Mr. Barney's home. They're trying to bring people into the militia, The claim here in the court from the defensive perspective was because of CNN wanted to do an article for the militia, for some sort of what they explained to be grenade golf at a golf course. But that's not the real reason. Needed more bodies, needed more people to do things like common law court, assembly post, other things we're talking about here in a minute. Why is or was Gerald Olson there? Have heard a lot of stuff about Mr. Olson? You're going to hear a lot of stuff about Mr. Fulton. And no doubt going to hear a lot more stuff from them about these two guys. But the reason that guy was in there is because Schaefer Cox gave a speech. He gave a bunch of speeches. First Amendment protected right. First Amendment protected right. We're not here telling you that Schaefer Cox is guilty because of the speeches that he made. That is the farthest thing from what we're asking here. But when somebody says in a public forum, hey, I got a 3,500 man militia, we are all well trained, we're organized, we are ready to go. You heard him say that countless times. But what he says in connection with that, we've got rockets and claymore mines and other things that are illegal. These guys take an interest in that, as they should. That's what they're charged with doing. You know J.R. Olson's background? My colleague Yvonne told you here at the beginning of the case, we're not here to ask you to like this guy. And we're still not here asking you that we like this guy. Not a whole lot to like. The point of the matter is, though, he has some experience. He's got some militia experience. He knew Paul Stramer. He was connected to Montana, connected to the Montanan Freeman. And this guy knows about those people. He's interested in them. So J.R. Olson had the right set of combinations to get in it. Common practice in law enforcement. It's been going on for hundreds of years, the use of informants, authorized by law. The instruction says the government can do it. So think about this for a second in terms of your timeline. When Olson goes into the militia commissioning ceremony in August, and he's in there as a listening post, right? And no doubt he says to the FBI, hey, I know Cox, I know people in Montana, I can probably go in there and listen for you. So they send him in. But I want you to pay attention as you deliberate and think about the evidence as you go through this, that from August to pretty much February, Olson's just a listening post. I mean, he's listening, he's reporting back. Not a whole lot's going on. Fair enough. We're not saying that there was. Okay. But what happens in the speech is Mr. Cox gives his compliance and fosters aggression to these folks. This is the first meeting of these new members of his militia. And we get the compliance fosters aggression. And we also get, for the first time, we hear about the assassination team, right? We've got this 6-member assassination team from Aurora, Colorado. They're coming to get me. And why they're coming to get me is because I'm so important to the movement that they want to take me down, amongst other things. In that speech and in others, you're going to hear what his motive is, Mr. Cox's motive. And his motive is, are we strong enough to do this yet? What are we going to be strong enough to make? When are we going to be strong enough to make a stand? Whether it's with violence or not. But have enough members and enough bodies that we do what? Ask yourself the what. That they do what? They leave us alone? Whatever the concept of liberty is to Mr. Cox is not really known. But it's not what the state of Alaska has in mind for him. It's not what the federal government had in mind for him. And that's what he's telling his followers. My concept of liberty. You've heard him say it's not under statutes that we're dealing with here, under man's law. It's under his own version of God's law, whatever that might be. And it's going to have that his version, peace, is going to have some implications down the road for his plans and what he's doing with respect to these members and stuff that he's accumulating over the next couple of months, right? So what happens, we get a KJNPs in November. August is the commissioning ceremony. We go to KJNP and we have this federal hit team thing. And what he's saying in terms of this to these to his members of his militia who are listening and want to attend to this, we have a pre-meeting. We got a couple of things going on, right? I've got this thing I want to announce. It's going to be big publicity. I'm going to go on television or down at the state courthouse and deal with this. And what do I need when I do these things? I need a security detail. I need a security detail, right? I need a couple of people to do this. And during this period of time when Mr. Cox is working on KJ&P, there's a couple of other things going on. We got this grand jury or de jure grand jury that's going on. This common law type of thing that he seeks protection of again. Because OCS is coming after him. Because the feds are pushing OCS. And he's going to go meet. And he goes to a meeting in June down to Far North Tactical. We have this whole discussion here in the case about this Far North Tactical thing and Bill Fulton. And Mr. Cox essentially says, you know, I didn't know what this grand jury de jure thing was all about until we played a recording and showed him the document. And he had brain fade on that. I didn't get involved in that, but the recording surely showed you certainly that he was involved in that room talking about this grand jury de jure thing. And we'll get to how, you know, I don't want to mess up a timeline. But in terms of what happened with Bill Fulton and Aaron Bennett, we'll get to that. I guarantee you we'll get to that. I want to stay on this timeline. So we go to, then, what else does he do? I want to go to asylum at Fort Wainwright. So he goes on the base, bends everybody up. I'm going to get killed. You got to give me asylum. I mean, even without calling a witness, the U.S. military doesn't give a citizen asylum. You don't get sanctuary. You can't run on the base. You can't get protection from federal assassins or anybody else, or the state of Alaska for that matter, by jumping onto Fort Wainwright and having a commander sign you, you know, a pass go card. You know, a go free card. It doesn't happen that way. So we decide, well, what are we going to do next? We're going to go to KJ&P. We're going to tell our story. So in terms of the charges, which we'll get in some detail later, this is where the solicitation piece comes into play. Cox is telling his people, we've got it on record from Olson, that anybody who's on this detail has to be prepared to kill, right? So I want you to think about that just for a minute. You walk into somebody's house and somebody says, you know, we're going to have this meeting, and when you leave, you go protecting someplace, you've got to pull the trigger and kill somebody. And how many people signed up to do that? This guy Coleman, the guy in the back, Lonnie Vernon, he signed up to do it. Gary Brockman signed up to do it. Schaefer Cox, right? Would have done it himself. He signed up to do it. So, and the guy in the ATV running around, he signed up to do it. Okay, I'm going to stop here on page 12, take a break. Alright, picking up with page 12. So, and the guy in the ATV running around, he signed up to do it. And what did they tell you that they did when they went out there? Let's start with Coleman. Coleman Barney put on the body armor, 160 rounds, right? You heard him say that. All for what? For practice. He's admitted to you already account for carrying the Hornet's Nest launcher on his rifle and carrying it out there for protection. But one thing about this, the facts we're talking about here is when you're going into court and you listen to this stuff, nobody's going to ask you to check your common sense at the door, you know. We've got a KJ&P, you got 4 or 5 people sitting there in the dark with lights, bringing guns, wearing body armor, putting in these launcher things that will, a Hornet's Nest grenade that'll cut, you know, flip you over in two, not cut you in two, but flip you over. And you know, Schaefer says it'll fold you up like a pretzel. You know, ha. Along with the assault rifles and 160 rounds. So if you get 4 guys and they're all carrying over 100 rounds, this is just for practice. Does that make any sense? We'll talk about the whiteboard too. Does that make any sense? Mr. Cox admitted to Bonnie Carricker that he is carrying a piece that night. It's going to become important to one of the charges later on. Remember, Bonnie was about like this. Bonnie was about like this big, older woman. She came walking up, sat in the stand in the chair, and says, you know, Mr. Cox, are you carrying a piece? And he says, what does he say? Do you remember what he said? He says, always. He's always carrying. So you can bank on him carrying a gun that night. On the stand, he kind of equivocated. I'm not sure, I might have. And that's what he told her that night. So you can bank on that fact. And we've had a couple of things going on that night, right? We have the KJNP piece. That's just one part of it. We also had the security detail downtown, right? So you had just as many people organized by Mr. Barney, right? The loyal major. You had just as many people conceivable at downtown Fairbanks doing the exact same thing. I mean, are we talking citizen vigilantes here or what? We had people downtown Fairbanks, 6 of them, whatever the number was, carrying guns. They were going to open up on people who might be plainclothes federal agents. And I submit to you, you know, all the questions I had with Mr. Barney back and forth about this, he didn't give any ground, and that's fine. Is put yourselves in the situation. What are you going to do? The court, leave? I'm sorry, counsel. Leave? Mr. Scrocky, yeah. The court, leave the jury out of it. Scrocky, yes, sir. What is one going to do when you're faced with a plainclothes law enforcement officer and your instructions are, as the whiteboard says, draw down? That person draws down. Are you going to say, are you a trooper? Are you going to say, are you a fed? How are you going to tell? The board makes absolutely no sense in the real world. The axiom is no plane survives contact with the opposition. Period. That's what would have happened in this case. But look what Mr. Barney puts down. We've got pistol, rifle, body armor, grenades, grenade launchers, parked in close gear and car. We've got details of the state courthouse, and that tells you something too mechanically. If all this evidence that we have, it all tells you something. How much time do you think we put into that? How much time did he write it? How much time did he take to plan it? How much time did he take to scope it out, or somebody else on their behalf? I mean, this wasn't something that was done in an afternoon where you sit there and go, okay, you know, let's have this security detail. How is it going to work? That's not how it was done. And that's what the major's role is, you know. How he was in charge of the details, so he put all the effort into it that is required. Bought up 100%, no doubt about that. He did the same thing at KJNP. We have pre-surveillance, bring the, you know, security strategy, bring the trailer, bring the lights, block the road. Right, all these things took time. This was not an accident. This was some sort of game he called a practice. Very serious and deadly practice is what it is. He also did the list on upper right-hand side. He made all those phone calls to get those folks to show up. Gary Brockman showed up. Gary Brockman came in here and told you that Schaefer Cox was still his commander and that he would still follow orders from him even today. Those orders would have been, you see a federal agent, plain clothes, and he draws down on you, you kill him. That's what his directions were. Brockman says, you know, we submit unbelievably. I would have put my rifle down. But he is a guy who's packing on his own at least 4 magazines for his semi-automatic rifle. And he also told you another important thing. He met Mr. Barney at his house. Barney shows him the 37mm launcher on the rifle and the Hornet's Nest cartridge, which Barney admits that he used that night, had in his rifle that night. That's your count of conviction for Coleman Barney. Brockman told you, Barney explained to me what it did. Shot out rubber pellets. Rubber bullets, actually. Rubber pellets, actually. So there's more evidence that Barney knew what he carried when he was carrying it. And there's your count of conviction for the Hornet's Nest 37mm launcher. That's one done. The other thing about KJNP with the testimony and the arguments of we had this planned and this was how it was going to work. Apparently, you know, Karen Vernon or someone in the Vernon household, there's this document didn't get the message because it says the bottom line there. The bottom line says use grenades to stop. And I don't know what grenades they're talking about. You don't. But that's what it says. So whether it's, you know, one of these or a Hornet's Nest grenade or whatever, nobody knows. And the point of the matter is you've got 4 people out there, 4, 5, 6, they're all going to have different interpretations of what the deadly force policy is going to be like. And you know, I asked Mr. Barney this, and the answer is nobody has any training. Nobody has any tactical training. Nobody really has any firearms training. Nobody has any skills in this. Not to say people can't self-defend themselves. No one's saying that. But if you're going out in a posse security detail and you're confronting members of the public on private property, which Mr. Barney seems to think is not a big deal, law enforcement can investigate stuff on private property all the time, right? Not a big deal. But when you go out there in the middle of the night and you do these things, the chances of something going bad, really, really bad, are really, really high. Can you imagine if if a plainclothes trooper went in there and didn't get the memo? Seeing these people out there with the semi-automatics, go to the next slide, please. And that's Mr. Cox's, one more. And they didn't get the memo, what's the first instinct going to be? They're going to pull like, what's going on, right? No one told me about this. And the board, the most important piece of the board is that it doesn't say do not shoot unless they shoot first. That'd be easy to put down there. But that's not what it says. We have draw down. You know, Mr. Barney can interpret it and extrapolate everything he wants. But that board says if officer draws down on Schaefer, Marty, or Judge Bartle, shoot him. That doesn't give them much of a pass. Next slide. And this is what law enforcement would have been. Kind of tough to see, huh? Washed out. Lonnie Vernon at KJ&P looks like 816, Exhibit 816. This is what would have been confronted with. Lonnie Vernon in his battle helmet, his battle gear with a SIG 223. That's just 1 out of 4 or 5 people standing out there in the dark under those lights. Not a very enticing prospect for those folks. Go ahead. So we have those plans at KJ&P or the courthouse down where Mr. Cox asked these people where he asked these people to kill for him, right? In December, what happens next? You've got this flyer put out in the newspapers about the common law court, and the import of this is that the Alaska Bar Association and the state of Alaska judiciary are under criminal investigation. Ask yourselves by who? There's a set of handcuffs on that flyer. You know, this guy has got 6 sets of handcuffs, right? Who's going to do the arresting under the Republic of Schaefer Cox? Who's going to do the incarceration under the Sovereign Republic of Schaefer Cox? Who's going to do the prosecution of the defense work when his county ranger thing comes into play? Who's going to complain to somebody in the event one of these county rangers uses a taser and hurts somebody? The bigger question is, in this whole thing, is why is it necessary? Why is there even this kind of effort, energy being expended if it's something like this? And the whole reason is we submit is because he's developing the Sovereign Republic of Schaefer Cox, right? Not by itself illegal, but the point of the matter is there's your motivation for all the weaponry you're going to see here and all the acts that you're going to see here, because this is you're justifying his power base and the acts that he's done in this case, which we'll get to because we're almost to the court sessions in December. The actions justify that and they support it. The next slide, please. So will you look at this? It's like, okay, we got this common law complaint form. You know, Schaefer Cox signed it because there's Lex Rex right on the upper right-hand side. That's his trademark. That's his manifesto. That's in the Alaska Peacemakers Militia Manual. Big discussion about Lex Rex. And the Alaska Peacemakers Militia, the No Fluff Training Manual, has things like grenadiers and snipers, and we've got military tactics. You can call it paramilitary if you want, but this is his document. And look at the number you got to call. It's like help with this forum. Call 456-2482. You can look at it in the evidence. It's Schaefer's phone number. You can go 959 indiscernible 03. There's Mr. Cox's number 2. He's the guy that's collecting all the data for this criminal investigation. And he's asking, what's he asking for? For citizens like yourself who may think they've had a beef with the state, didn't go the way they wanted to, come see me. We will resolve it at Denny's, right? Because you know that's coming up because that's what they did. This man, Mr. Barney's residence, 3-step plan on how to file a common law complaint. You know, what's step number 1? Fill out the form. What's step number 2? Declare your status as a sovereign citizen. Rebut your status as a legal fiction. So keep all this in mind when you think about Mr. Barney's testimony, where he says, "Hey, I just got interested in this. You know, wasn't going to go in up to my head. I'm just dipping my toe in, right?" But what has he done through the course of his whole investigation? What has he done? He's done organizing the common law jury security detail, puts the guy in his house, drives him around. He's his personal chauffeur, right? This is a guy who's I'm just not interested in this. I'm only part way in. Next one, please. These court cases in December are important because they provide for you a window of what's going on in Schaefer Cox's mind. And you can't read somebody's mind, but you can do a couple of other things that help you along the way, right? And how to figure out. That's what they say and what they do and how they act and how they react. Okay, I'm not telling you something you don't already know. And what does he do with this? He goes in front of Judge Quavar we got this big thing going on. He gets Coleman Barney to get all these people to come to court, right, for a hearing. And this is for the weapons charge from his activities with the Liberty Bell Task Force. There's so many, right? Excuse me. So anyway, the Liberty Bell Task Force, or is the Liberty Bell Network? We know that the Liberty Bell Network, that the Liberty Bell is Schaefer Cox. He's the guy who's sending people out to go videotape. Okay, I'm at page 21. Going to take a break. 21. All right, going to pick up on day 22, page 21. We know from the Liberty Bell Network that the Liberty Bell is Schaefer Cox. He is the guy who's sending people out to go videotape cops when they think something's not going on. And you know what? Fine. But there's a process for things that go wrong in searches. There's a process that people can avail themselves to. It's called the court system. And it's called, getting a lawyer. And that's the way it works. But this time Cox goes out, and what does he do? He brings a gun to a search and wearing body armor. Not a smart move. But he's going to challenge it anyway, and that's his right to do that. And it's also a place where he's got to suffer the consequences if it doesn't go his way. So he gets arrested, and he's charged with failing to tell officer he's carrying a piece. Again, got it in his pocket. But to him, it's not good enough. I should be allowed to do that kind of thing. So what happens? We go into Judge Quavar's courtroom. He's going to make this big sell to everybody. And he tells, we got all these people out here in the courtroom. He does the same thing to them. He brings them all in. And he's got people recording this, and they shouldn't be. And he goes up and he tells Judge Quavar, and you know what he says? He says to her, there are people who would rather have you dead in your sleep than come argue with you in court. We submit it's a pretty hefty thing to say to a judge. But he goes further than that. And this is like the lower layers of idiosyncrasies of what he says, right? Don't for a second think that this guy is interested in sending chocolate and flowers to the judge. I would rather send chocolate and flowers to you. I would rather see you at your home. I would rather do this or that or the other thing and meet you downtown. Wrong. It's a subtle, I wouldn't even call it subtle. It's a form of intimidation designed to get her, the troopers, and anybody else to back off. Because you heard in the recordings that he says, let them know we know where you live. That'll make you think twice, right? This isn't just something that, we're in a small town and it's Mayberry and everything's great. That's not what it's about. Because the next time he says it to the Sergeant Schoenberg, who's in court with Judge Quavar, when he says that to her, he says this to Schoenberg, we have you outmanned and outgunned, and we can have you dead in one night. Here's a hug. Not a laughing matter. Wasn't laughing matter in court. And the thing is that he's an opportunist, and he'll take advantage of anything he could and can get what he wants. And that's why when Sarah Thompson came in here, remember Sarah? She's pregnant, living with Coleman Barney. Shocked at the transition from Barney, the Coleman Barney she knew, to the Coleman Barney you have here in court today. You know what does she say? She said, yeah, we came and showed up, and what happened? He sweeped back and says, all these people back here are with me on this. Words to that effect. What did it do to her? She's like, I'm not on this. I'm not backing you up. Coleman Barney said Schaefer Cox went off script. This is right down the pike for him. This wasn't off script. So there's your next stage. We're going to challenge the court. We're going to challenge the judge. We're going to challenge the troopers. We're supposed to have this big powwow afterwards, and everybody's going to get together. Well, that never happens. Remember Ron Wall? Schaefer Cox drives by his house, shows up on a Sunday. You know what? Fairbanks is a small town. You can meet with these guys anytime you want on Pegger Road. Doors always open. Ron Wall knows this guy his whole life, but instead he gets the family visit and he's wearing body armor. We know where you live, Ron. We know where you live. Is what's going on. It's the back off piece, right? Vernon is there with him at these court hearings. Barney's doing security details. These guys are all marching along the timeline with each other, right? So what does Mr. Cox decide to do? You know, instead of confronting this, he could have gone downtown and sat in the square and said, "I'm Schaefer Cox, arrest me." And he could have fought the battle that way, in a court of public opinion or some other way. But instead he ducks cover and he runs, taking his family with him. I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm missing Denny's, right? The Denny's piece. Next slide, please. Coleman calls a jury. Barney's there. Mr. Barney's parents are there. They get instructed on how to return the verdict ahead of time. So what kind of common law trial is this? They're saying, oh, we'll send the state notice. You guys come and participate if you want. You know, who's going to do that? I mean, at Denny's? I mean, come on. But the operative force and effect of this is serious. I mean, people can joke about, you know, rendering a verdict over the Grand Slam and all that stuff. But the operative effect of this is serious. One is he thinks, and the people in the room think, and this is going to be absolved. This is going to absolve a charge case from the state of Alaska. It's going to go away because I'm sovereign and we don't play by your rules. The bigger piece is he's wiping out by his verdict a plea of guilty on the domestic violence situation with his wife. Do you think that was a fair trial? You know, talk about a kangaroo court. You know, the outcome was already determined before it even started. Part ego, part political, part moving his plan down the road for this republic that he's got and he's building. And I don't say that, and you might go, republics, like, what are you talking about? Like sovereign republic? Because why would you need your own court system? Why would you need your own county rangers, right? Why would you need 40 CSOC grenades with your 37mm launchers? Why do you need handcuffs, tasers, and all those other plans? Because at some point they're going to be strong enough. They will be. And that's the objective here. This is the accumulation of the weapons and the things we've got from indiscernible, that the motive behind it. Remember, I told you that it was pretty quiet from August in terms of the investigation, August through December or so. What happens in February is we kind of kick it into a little different frame, a little higher gear. Because you know why? Because Schaefer Cox tells Gerald Olson, and he tells Lonnie Vernon, I need you guys to go down to this militia convention in Anchorage. And Bill Fulton's going to be down there, right? But Bill Fulton, I'm afraid, is trying to kill me. Aaron Bennett is going to be down there. The Aaron Bennett, I'm afraid, is trying to kill me. I submit to you folks, you've got 5 hours of audio, okay? You try to find a statement anywhere about Bill Fulton's trying to kill me and Aaron Bennett's trying to kill me. You're not going to find it. You can look through all of the documents you want. You can call all 900 of them. You're not going to find it. And I'll talk about this in a rebuttal later on. Hold on. Give me just a second. Page 26. I'm going to use that. But I get, you know, the government's got the burden of proof here, so we have 2 chances to speak to you. So I get the big, long speech. Defense get their speech, and because it's our burden of proof, it's our job to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. The way the rules work is I get to come back again later on, and we'll talk about that in more detail. But the deal is, you're not going to find any evidence except what this guy said on the stand last week, that Bill Fulton and Aaron Bennett were out to kill him. And that's why I've got these big concerns. And that's why I told the court this. And that's why I told the court that. There's nothing in there in this case. He didn't tell this to AUSA Cooper. He didn't tell anybody that these 2 guys were coming after him. And that's why he did what he did. That's part of the blame the government thing, right? It's the government's fault that we're all here. It's the instigator's fault, investigator's fault that we're all here. It's Bill Fulton's fault we're all here, Gerald Olson, etc. You're not going to hear that. You're going to hear it, but it's not going to be substantiated. What is substantiated is this. In those recordings, you hear Mr. Cox on his own volunteer that I want you guys to get grenades, and you hear him say, because you know he says it and you know he knows how to do it, you stick in the ALS fuse and you throw in some black powder, you tap the bottom, and you're going to be good to go. That's how you do it. So not only did the guy do the Silencer 101 lecture at Barney's house, middle of February, remember that? This is how you do it. You cut the apple slices, you know. That is the way down the road. You know, we got so much here to talk about that I don't have enough time to do it. And I talk fast. But this thing, the grenade piece, that's the grenade 101. That's how we do it. That's recorded. It's irrefutable. It's the idea, and he sends Vernon and Olson down to do it. On the way down, it's a long drive from Fairbanks to Anchorage, right? Long drive. No mention from Vernon of, gee, you know Fulton's going to kill Schaefer. Gee, you know Aaron Bennett's going to kill Schaefer. Nothing like that. They talk about silencers. They get to the hotel, you know. The first thing they do is they say, Lonnie Vernon tells Fulton, you got some grenades. And it becomes a joke of the weekend. It's like, you know, in Bill Fulton speak, dude, I just met you and you're telling me, do you got grenades? Sorry, right. So what happens? You know, Fulton provides a room for Cox and his men. Fulton talks to Schaefer on the phone and says, hey, how's it going? Can I trust you? We're talking business here. Right, and we have some text through the case where Schaefer tells Fulton, we're cool. Not anything on the phone saying, hey Bill, I know you want to kill me, but are we okay now? You don't have that, right? You've got pretty much common going on, talking back and forth. These guys, they're on a pretty good relationship. Blown over. Whatever happened, you know, Far North Tactical with Fulton and Zerby and all of that other stuff is gone. One more piece I almost forgot before they leave. Fulton, I'm sorry, Olson and Vernon, for this meeting. What does Mr. Cox volunteer? I know a guy who has C4, military grade explosive, right? And we're going to do with that, and we're going to do with that. What does he suggest we do? We package it up and vacuum seal it like salmon, and we store it for a long time. More evidence of intent. The guy wants explosives. If you think about the timeline of the case, machine guns, not so much. Full autos, not so much. I want the stuff that goes boom. I want C4, I want grenades, and when I get my grenades like this guy, I fill that bottom up where I can take the fuse off, right, and put in a new one that works that I got from Aaron Bennett, right? Or put the fuse back in there. I want stuff that's going to send the shrapnel flying. And that's a quote, right? And I just showed you something that Mr. Brakefield told you yesterday. He had a chat with Mr. Cox. Where? Far North Tactical. Ground zero for Schaefer Cox. Oh my God, Bill Fulton lives there. Or Aaron Bennett works there. He owns it. He's going to kill me. They have a chat right there going, you put some stuff in here, cover up with some bronze, get a new fuse. It's party time, right? So he sends his men down to the militia convention. They order 50 grenades in the process. You recall the conversation in the hotel room. They're recorded. They're videotaped. What does Mr. Vernon volunteer that he wants? Right? They're talking about grenades. They're in the hotel room, and he says, you know, it's kind of humorous in a way, but they were in a close environment. And he says, what are you doing with suppressors, right? He whispers that out, and Fulton's like, what are you doing? And they start talking suppressors. He wants a silencer for his 223 for his battle rifle. They talk about twist. It's going to be off paper, right? I'm not going to have any documentation for this, excuse me, so it won't be traced back to you. Next slide, please. Lonnie Vernon says, I got a need for it, right? Fulton says, I can get them under the table and I'm going to make them disappear, which is what Lonnie Vernon wants. I mean, in terms of Lonnie Vernon, the hotel room conversations pretty much do the case. There are lots of things afterwards, but the bulk of the evidence there is on those conversations. Because I got grenades, I want 50, you know, we're looking for these things. I want a silencer for my 223 because I got a need for it. He runs around with Olson in a recorded conversation after those hotel meetings. They start talking about full autos, and what's he mad at, you know, in a recorded conversation after these hotel meetings, they start talking about full autos, and what's he mad at, you know, in Lonnie Vernon speak, you know, Aaron Bennett's a son of a bitch because he won't give me a full auto off paper. He won't give me a full auto so we can have our own weapons of mass destruction. That's what he says. And he says, you know, why can't we just get the pieces and parts and grind the numbers off of them? That's where his motivations and his intentions are lying. Go ahead. In that weekend, we have conversations with Fulton saying with Cox, deal with my men. In that weekend, we have Vernon saying, we know where the judges and the DAs live. And that's ominous in and amongst itself. Because no matter what you might think about a command structure, in this command structure, in these individuals here, you got no way of controlling what your men do. It's without a doubt that Lonnie Vernon's angry. He's got a lot on his plate. He's mad at judges. He's mad at the system. He's mad at the IRS. He's mad at everything. Okay, I'm going to pause here on page 31. Pausing on page 31 of day 22. Okay, picking up on page 31 of day 22. He's mad at judges, he's mad at the system, he's mad at the IRS, he's mad at everything. And in those conversations, he talks about killing people. And in one of those conversations, he talks about killing women and children during the course of one of these missions. You know, that wasn't produced by the government's informant in this case. That was coming out of his mouth. And no matter what you think about Bill Fulton or what anybody else thinks about Bill Fulton, what did Bill Fulton tell him? You do that, I'm going to come up there, I'm going to kill you myself because that's off limits. That's what he says in response. In that whole weekend meeting, which is recorded, numerous conversations of these guys, we got no mention of the Bennett-Fulton conspiracy to kill Schaefer Cox. It's not there. Aaron Bennett admits on a recording he's already given Schaefer Cox these ALS fuses. That the type we found in the trailer, right? Go ahead. Aaron, here's a quote. Fulton tells me, tell me what your thread twist is. I will fucking make sure that happens for you. But again, that's between you and me and no one else. You didn't get it from me, and as long as you just send me the thread twist, there's no way to trace that back. Lonnie Vernon says, okay. Later in February of that, after they get back, I'll have to slide for you in a minute. Lonnie and Coleman Barney are talking about silencers. Remember the testimony on the cross-exam? I was asking Coleman Barney, Vernon called about that he was going to be the guy getting these silencers because Olson had to correct him. Olson's like, no, I'm getting them, not Lonnie. I'm the one who's organizing that. So they were talking about silencers back and forth too. That's what he says. That's his voice. That's his words, and you can bank on that. Who was going to be at this summit? Schaefer Cox? Others members of the militia? Schaefer Cox calls in. He's got his men down there working with the very man he thinks, and with the very man he thinks is going to kill him. He sends his own men down there. Not much of a threat there. Go ahead. Got that one too. If there was such a threat from Bill Fulton, why are they texting each other back and forth? Why is he asking him for radios and recommendations? Why is he asking him to give him a free hotel room? Right? And you heard the man testify to you after 4 weeks of trial, and he comes up with this story about the Fulton conspiracy. It's going to take another step after this. We'll get to that too, because frankly, folks, he lied to you. Go ahead. Fulton comes back, meets with Schaefer Cox on Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday. Keep this in mind, the recorder fails that day, right? Olson thinks it's going to work. It doesn't. He doesn't know for a long time down the road that these recordings work or not. For the most part, I would say 95% of the ones did. This one malfunctioned, loaded it incorrectly. But this is Super Bowl party. He comes back and he talks to Cox about C4. He's got a guy who has it. Mr. Cox is interested. Talks about machine guns. He's interested. Talk about the time frame or the shelf life of C4 because he likes that stuff that goes boom. And around this time is where Mike Anderson enters the picture. So let's talk about him for just a minute. Go ahead. We have the militia commissioning ceremony in August of 2009, right? 2010. And Anderson and Cox go back a year before that. This is part of the conspiracy to commit murder of federal officials. In that time frame, it's a year after the stock market collapsed. Things aren't very good, and frankly, aren't still very good, right? They got some concerns. So in a meeting on a porch, Schaefer Cox's house, they come up with a plan. What happens if all this stuff happens? They do checkpoints, and things get worse, and all this other stuff. What are we going to do? Well, that guy's answer is, we're going to get them before they get us. So Mike, I want you to start developing a list. And Mike is an anarchist, smart enough not to join the militia, not his thing. Doesn't like uniforms, doesn't like command structure. But he'll do the database piece. And you can call it a list, a database, whatever you want to call it. But he's looking for information on people where they live. And he did it. He proved to you beyond a doubt that he did this stuff. Mike Anderson and Cox go back a long way. Cox gets in the DV situation. He calls who to come get my stuff, Mike Anderson. He tells Mike Anderson, I got a stand full auto, right? So there's another admission by Mr. Cox. This is a full auto, notwithstanding the fact that the FBI tested it, and it's full auto, so you can bank on that. The Sten is full auto. He's guilty. Straightforward, easy. He admits that it's full auto. He knew its characteristics. that it's full auto. He's got 10 magazines in the trigger loaded with 9mm. It'd take a long time to go pop, 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 right? Why would you do that unless you knew it was full auto? That's really just a side piece. But he's admitted it on tape. He's admitted it to Anderson, and he's good for that. You should have no trouble convicting him of that or the other ones, for that matter. But he also, Anderson's a curious guy. Look in the bag. What else does he find? He finds a silencer, right? And what else does he tell you he finds? A couple of these things, right? So we're looking at this, and pardon me for not knowing the time frame, but we're looking at this when this is March of 2010. He already got these things, right? He's interested in them, going back that far, and that carries itself all the way to the day of arrest. And what does he ask Mike Anderson to do over the course of his relationship with him? He's like, hey Mike, I got a problem with OCS. There's a gal on my case, Wendy Williams. I want you to find out where she lives. So okay, we call Mike Anderson. He's been immunized. You know why he's been immunized? Because Mike Anderson got out. He's scared enough that at the end of the day that he destroyed the database or the hard drive, right? He pulled the ripcord, went Geronimo, and is like, nothing good's going to come out of this, I'm done. That's what he did because he's worried about Mr. Cox was going to do with this stuff. And why is that? Because people are pinging him. People are calling him. J.R. Olson's calling him, and I'm getting ahead of myself again. So what about Wendy Williams? Why would Mike Anderson have any interest at all in Wendy Williams? Why would Mike Anderson have in his car a document with Wendy Williams' personal identification on it? Go ahead, please. Why would he do that? He's got no interest in her. It's only because Schaefer Cox told him to. Research it, sir. And what does Schaefer Cox say? Say, I got the information where she lives. Anderson goes to her house, takes a picture of what might be her van, right? These are the things that are pretty specific in detail. This is not something that, you sort of like make up on the fly, right? And he says, I took a picture, go back to Schaefer Cox, and what does he say? She may have to get a bullet through her window or windshield, right? That's what he testified to. And he testified in January and February of last year. We get this, given to him at the IACC. This man gets on the stand and tells you, this is all Mike Anderson's deal. We submit, does that make any sense to you at all? How is Mike Anderson going to know Curtis female DHS border control? I think I'll just write that down, right? How is he going to know Tom Stedler, Trina Bootcamp? I mean, this guy lives off the grid. He doesn't know these people, never associated with them. What else does he say up at the top? We've got the Vernon's phone numbers, and it says, I need the name of federal marshals. Why is that? You know why that is? Because of the sideshow on the base with the marshals coming. With the marshals who's talking about the hit squad that might take Schaefer Cox out. I need the names of those guys. SWAT. And then what does he say? He draws a map up of the federal Fairbanks building, says maybe we can get some cameras, find out who these guys are, get some license plates, that kind of thing. He's doing this on his own. Why would he do something like that? That makes absolutely no sense. He's doing it because Schaefer Cox is telling him to do it. Writes it down, takes it home. We got the name of these folks. We got Curtis, right? We'll talk about all these people in a minute. Gary Tillip, he's a trooper, also known as Trooper Butthole, to Schaefer Cox as he lives up the street. And we got Ron Wall. I'm going to talk about these federal people because that's important to the Count 12, the conspiracy to kill federal employees. That's his plan. Anderson knows about it. He's telling people in this case, he's telling J.R. Olson and he's telling Lonnie Vernon that I've got a list, I've got a database, and Mike can find out anything on anybody. And that's going to carry all the way from the beginning of this in 2009 all the way to 2010, right? There are federal employees. You got to ask yourself, why is Ron Wall on this list? He's known this guy his whole life, but apparently that's not enough. It's not enough that I've known him. He's been a neighborhood friend. He knows my family. Same with Trina Bootcamp. The woman opened her home to this guy, and others, out of goodness of her heart, fed him lunch, welcomed his family, and he makes a phone call to her. You saw her reaction when she came in here, right? He makes a phone call and says, hey, I'm on the terrorism watch list. Because he's got a beef with the TSA. They're easy pickings for him, right? And you can get in the face of TSA when you want. Who's going to stand up for the TSA, right? So he calls Trina and says, am I on the list? And she says, you know what? I can't tell you that, but what I can tell you is act your age, go through the line, and get on the plane. Not good enough. So what does he tell Mike Anderson? Trina Bootcamp is just going to follow orders, so she's going to have to go. And what did she do? Think about that. What did she do? She did her job in the wrong agency, and that's the discretion that's being used here, right? What about Jimmy Johnson thing? You might have yourselves, hey, Mike Anderson did this on his own, and I wasn't part of it. Anderson pretty much said as much. I was ticked, so I did some research and I found the name of Jimmy Johnson. Called Jimmy Johnson. He works near the federal building, right? What's his crime? Being a federal marshal? Schaefer Cox responsible for that? Yep. He has an agreement with Mike Anderson. That agreement extends and carries all the way through because he knows that Mike Anderson's looking for it because he told him to do it. Under conspiracies law, he's responsible for that because he knows what Anderson's doing is furtherance of the conspiracy. Anybody else who knows about this list is responsible for it too, as you've been instructed. So understand the nature. This is an overt act. Both these things are overt acts. These lists in furtherance of the conspiracy, therefore to murder federal officials, and the solicitation by the way thereof. Go ahead. Let's talk about Nanette Curtis. She's on the list. What's her crime? And I'm sorry to kind of going heavy on you on this, but this is important. What's her crime? Standing in Walmart in the pharmacy with her child, getting medicine. And what does our guy, Mr. Sovereign Republic, do? Oh, you're with whoever, so I'm just giving you my blessing. You're authorized under the Constitution, oh, so you're good. He engages her in a debate. She's got her kid, she's wearing her uniform, moves her kid behind her. And for what? So he can get public credit? There goes Schaefer getting in the face of somebody else again. But it's a little different than that. It's one thing to leave it and go and have a nice day, nice debate. But her name ends up on the list, and I submit to you, what is her crime here? She wasn't even doing her job. She's wearing her uniform. She's on a lunch break with her child. Doesn't matter to him. If it did, her name wouldn't be on the list. Let's talk about Dawn Baptist. Remember her? She dog handler TSA. What's her crime? She's walking her explosives dog through the terminal to get the dog associated with the Fairbanks terminal. Explosive dog, good thing, right? There's people out there who want to do bad things to airplanes, and they're out there, or they always will be. Good thing. So she's walking her dog through with Mr. Hollingsworth. What do they get? They get the Nazi treatment. Just want to know who the Nazis are, right? But it doesn't stop there. It takes it a step further, and when they break apart, runs up behind her, takes the cell phone of her face. You think she might want to know where her picture is because we don't have it. Do you think she might want to know where the picture went because we don't have it? What's her crime? Doing her job, gets up in the morning, goes to work, takes the dog, puts on the uniform, gets her picture taken, and now, who knows where it went. Same thing with Mr. Stedler. Puts on his uniform, goes to work, see you, hun, see you this afternoon, gets in a debate with Schaefer Cox. What happens to him? Now he's on the list. What's his crime? Working for the feds, working for the man, working for TSA, working for someone I don't like. So we're going to task Mike Anderson finding out stuff like this. And this isn't the first time this has happened. This TSA thing, this is an issue. The guy tried to smuggle a rat through the airport, he got caught, went through security. Jan Stewart came in here and says, we had a Thanksgiving meal dinner time. Okay, I'm going to pause on page 41. 41 of day 22. All right, let's start with page 41 of day 22 of the Schaefer Cox trial. We're going to start with page 41. Jan Stewart came in here and says, we had a Thanksgiving meal, dinner time, and what's this guy talking about? Your typical Thanksgiving conversation? Yep, let's light the houses of TSA on fire, and when they come out, we'll shoot them all. That's not family Thanksgiving conversation, but it shows you where he's going with this. This is not something we're just walking in one conversation. By the way, this is what he said. Convict him, right? This is all the background stuff and tells the story about where his motivation lies and what's going on in his head, right? You say that Mrs. Stewart has a bias, but she kept it pretty clean. She's trying to protect her daughter, trying to find a way to deal with that kind of a situation. Difficult one, no doubt. Cox says the same thing when he's in the Vernon's home in February. Light the houses on fire, shoot them when they come out. And you know what else we submit? I'll tell you what else. Those 40 canisters with a range of 100 yards, that'll catch someone's house on fire. That'd be a pretty nifty tool to use, wouldn't it? Shoot it through the window, smoke goes, things catch on fire when they run outside, game over, right? Crowd control, non-lethal aggressiveness, make any sense? It doesn't. They have a range of 100 yards. If you're going to be contacted by law enforcement, you better shoot it right here. Mr. Altman came. Mr. Altman works with these things. He makes them. You let one of those off in this room, everybody's going down. That's just a canister. You let off one of those grenades, triple action, 3 pieces, all going on fire. This whole place is going to be in flames, and you're going to be all affected by CS gas. No one's going anywhere. What better way to incapacitate your opposition? Next slide, please. This is Wendy Williams' information in Mr. Anderson's truck. What else did he tell you he did for Mr. Cox? You know, going to do the security detail. This is the 3rd one or the 4th one. When he's having this meeting with OCS, right? Sits outside with an AK-47 and body armor, and he kind of scratches his head and he says, you know, what the hell am I doing here? While Mr. Cox is having a meeting inside with OCS about his child. Go ahead. Don't think that, you know, Mr. Barney's not involved and there's no communication going on between these two guys. Definitely, he's the quiet one, right? He's quiet major. But you know from the conversations and the texts that we've shown conversations with Olson and phone calls back and forth that they're communicating. And here's the piece about not, you know, checking your common sense at the door. He's living with, before the takedown, he's living with Schaefer Cox for 3 weeks, driving him around. He's making jokes about being in his car. He knows he's a fugitive, and he brings him into his home anyway. And we submit it's not because he felt for Mr. Cox, because they were joined at the hip. When you live with someone for 3 weeks and you're driving him around all the time, you're going to talk. You know, talk about these things. You're going to talk about getting these things. You're going to talk about future plans. You're going to do how you're going to get out of the state, etc. Communicated back and forth by text to KJNP. Next slide. I know I'm talking a lot. 241. Here's what I want. Here's what I submit to think about in 241. When you listen to that conversation, you're going to hear people going back and forth. Okay, that's the way the evidence is. We accept that because that's what it is. It's a roundtable conversation. But if you listen to that exhibit, I'm telling you right now, you listen to that exhibit, you're going to hear this guy bringing it up to everybody time and time again. Fine, okay, great. It's the reason why he's doing it, and the reason we submit he's doing it is because he's testing the mettle of his troopers. What do you think about it? He's going around and he's going around and he's going around. He gets Olson to talk about it. He's the leader. He's leading the debate. He gets Thessing to talk about it. Thessing is like, hey, this is a bad idea. The important piece for this case is, what does Coleman Barney say about it? He says we're not strong enough yet. We have to make it into a reality. Practice Train says so right there. There you go, Steve. Look at the screen. We need to bluff it, train, turn it from a bluff into an action. You're not going to hear anybody on those recordings say we are the family militia. We should be doing things with the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts. We should be preparing sandbags for when the Salcha River floods. We should be working at the Pioneers' Home. We should be volunteering our time. And instead, from this guy, we get Gandhi, Mandela, and Dr. Martin Luther King. 2 of those men are rolling in their graves. Gandhi never needed a security detail. Gandhi never talked about 241. Neither did Dr. Martin Luther King. They didn't have the arsenal of weapons in a trailer. They weren't asking for C4. You're going to hear because you heard it from him, right? 4 weeks you waited to hear from him. He testifies and he said, you know, that 241 thing, that wasn't me. That came from J.R. Olson. But I'll bet you can reply this in your mind and go, wait a minute, from Bill Fulton, because he told me on February the 6th, you know, the only tape that wasn't recorded. Think about that. You think about that guy's credibility. You think about how he asked those questions when he was asked about them. You think about whether he looked you in the eye when he testified. First day, yep, when we're proselytizing and getting all the background speech about how great everything is and what his political philosophy is, yep, he looked you in the eye. When it comes time for crunch time about the facts, I lock with the lawyer, he's not telling you the truth. And the reason is he's lying to you. You know, he's lied about his militia, three, you know, he'll lie about the numbers in his militia, and he used anything to justify what he wants to say. He does it and puts these people's names on here without remorse, without regret, because he's lying to you. But the bigger piece is there's not one scintilla of other additional evidence outside of that one statement he made here on the stand that says 241 came from the government informants. It's not there. You're not going to find it. Had they had it, they would have given it to you because it came from him. And the reason you know that is because who was the first one to present those early defense force policy of 141? Didn't come from Olson. Didn't come from Mr. Thessing didn't come from Mr. Barney, it came from him. And then it went up to 2-for-1, right? Olson doesn't help matter much by going for 5-for-1. You know, dumb thing to say. Granted, accepted. But we take it back to 2-for-1 and we go from there. Now you're going to hear a lot of this later on about, hey, Olson's pushing, right? From the law enforcement perspective, you got a guy who's saying, I want grenades, I want C4, now I want to kill people, and I got a list. You thought that they might want to know who's on the list to give them a little heads up. Valid law enforcement technique. You got to inquire. You don't want people to die. You don't want there to be a standoff. You want to have some degree of control. On March the 10th, there was a degree of control, except for that one guy who shows up, right, Mr. Unlucky. But you want to have some degree of control when people's lives are in danger, and you got people talking about that, and things they've admitted they can do the job with. Go ahead. And at the end of the 2-for-1 meeting, right, Mr. Thessing's in there. This is in the bus. We left all the phones outside. Mr. Barney's in there. He hears this. He hears this commander say, you know, I would like to have 8-second fuses and powder that burns fast enough to really send that shrapnel flying, because we're using the 2-second fuses right now. We are using the 2-second fuses right now. You know Barney's associated with this. You know he knows it. His relative, Mr. Marchbanks, came in here this week and said, yep, I saw them practicing with practice grenades. Like what? Practice grenades? That was interesting. So the quiet one has been practicing with practice grenades after hearing this. But yet Mr. Barney, you'll hear the whole litany of, we'll get these later on, of I don't knows. I didn't know about the common law court. I didn't know about this thing in the Carlson Center. I didn't know about the grand jury de jure. I didn't know about those lawsuits. I don't know about grenades. I don't know about silencers. I don't know what his plans are. I don't know where he's going to go. Right? Make any sense? Over a span of multi-months, I'm that ignorant? It doesn't make any sense. Go ahead. After that 2-for-1 meeting, what does Mr. Cox do next? He gives Mr. Olson a note. Hey, this guy Malik Jones, he's giving Patriots a bad time. Give this to Anderson. He doesn't say, hey, do it yourself. He says, give it to Anderson. What else he do in the meeting? In that meeting, he tells Olson, come take a look at this map. I'm going to show you where Wall lives, and I'm going to show you where some other people live. So you get out the map, and we do all this stuff. He's talking to a member of his militia to do home visits. Think not. The phrase from Vernon's house when Cox is hiding out there, right? On the 14th, he's hanging out and he says, you know, this is going to turn into a slowly escalating criminal-esque war of attrition. And why is that? Attrition, you know, we're going to take some away from you right until I get what I want, which is the sovereign republic of Schaefer Cox, where he can live under whatever version of liberty he decides is appropriate. He gets to make the call, right? We talk about burning houses and killing everybody. There's a discussion between the Bradway stash that Vernon knows about. Want to go find out where that stuff is? Olson wants to find out where that stuff is because it could be important, it could be dangerous, it could help facilitate their plans. Cox says, I'm going to kill a buttload and offer peace. What's that supposed to mean, offer peace? You're just going to pick your target and go ahead. Meanwhile, Mr. Vernon's meeting with Mr. Olson and says, hey, see those power transformers in that cell phone tower? We can start with those. We can wrap some stuff around the pole, blow it up, knock it down, knock out their communications. He's not out of it. He's still engaged. Go ahead. He's also looking for the list, and in the course of these conversations, you hear him say, you know what? If we don't get our own, or if we can't get it from Anderson, we'll get it ourselves. We'll find some other way. The 19th conversation, you've heard that twice already. This is in Mr. Barney's home. Mr. Cox says, on a mission, I'm not against the killing of women and children. His two compatriots say, you know, I'm not into that. Despite the fact that we're talking about homicide, like we're talking about killing somebody, I won't go the extra step and kill their wives and children during some sort of mission. It doesn't seem to trouble Mr. Cox. He says he's morally justified in rolling judges' heads, and he's not against putting a head in a box to send it someplace. That's the kind of mindset you're dealing with it in connection with these items. And we talk about 2-for-1 again, and the evidence might show, you know, that's your call to make. We'll just say that it shows Mr. Olson is pushing like when it's 2-for-1, when 2-for-1, right? For a reason, and the point of the matter is that the exigency with this, the urgency with this, is that one of the discussion points is that if I get arrested 2-for-1, if one of my kids gets picked up 2-for-1, right, you've got that OCS thing sitting out there pretty much gone. But you never know, what if there is an arrest by Mr. Cox in company with Mr. Vernon and Mr. Barney on this, on the road. Trooper pulls him over and says, Schaefer Cox, there's a warrant, you're arrested. What do you think Lonnie Vernon's going to do? What do you think Coleman Barney's going to do? You can't control that people are going to do when you discuss things of that nature. Go ahead. This is important enough to Coleman Barney that he put it in his notebook, Mission 2 for 1, and it was sitting right next to his bed, towards the bottom. That you signed up, get signed up on Twitter. That should send you a message. Get signed up on Twitter so I can get the information about when 241 happens, right? 00 Schaefer Cox. Go ahead. More weapons, Bradway Road, 21st of February. Schaefer says, go out there and get some pick some cherries out of there, right? The 30 caliber's there. Olson tells you when they go out there and do this, he sees 8 grenades. Barney says he's calling you on that. Never happened, so we got a lock in. We got a lock, right? He said it is. He says he doesn't. But the point of the matter is, you were told in opening they were charged with those 8 grenades. They're not. That's just other evidence. You can decide to believe Olson on that or not. That's your call. He said what he said. 8 grenades, pineapple in the shed. Maybe they are these, maybe they aren't. After that conversation, what does Mr. Barney say with respect to the grenades? The guy who's always making jokes. That's another sort of list of excuses for Mr. Barney. He's like, I'm just always making jokes about this stuff. It just so happens that you catch me at those moments in these recordings when I've got a big sense of humor. And he says, 8 grenades. So we're at page 51. I'm going to take a break on page 51. All right, I'm picking up with page 51 on day 22. And he says, 8 grenades is not much unless you're one of the judges or the DAs that we're looking at. Pretty funny stuff unless you're one of the judges or the DAs that they're looking at. And you know that they're looking, please. We're accelerating towards the 10th. On the 22nd, Cox admits he's got a full auto sten to Olson, and he set up the communication strategy, right? And I know, folks, it's common that we all have yellow phones and red phones and different colored phones and a combination communication strategy and coded numbers and something that we all have. We organize that in Mr. Barney's house because by that time he's already there, right? What else did Coleman do before he moved in, before Schaefer moved into his house? Went to court for him, found out that he had a warrant for him, went there with Olson. He sat there and told you, I thought Schaefer was going to leave the state. We call baloney on that because he went to court. He talks to Schaefer about, and Schaefer shows up about 2 or 3 days afterwards. And what does this guy do, He brings him into his house, a guy with a warrant, a guy with all these things, a guy he's lobbed practice grenades with, right? So from this note too that on that day Mr. Cox takes Olson is like, go get my AR with the grenade launcher on it. And I forgot the other piece with respect to Mr. Cox and the AR and the grenade launcher. There's a text at KJNP time, November 23rd, where he says on that evening, I'm sitting upstairs with my AR at the top of the stairs and a hornet's nest inside. And so he's admitted to having them, admitting to knowing what they are, so he's good for that count as well. But we'll get to that. Go ahead, I need to speed up. Here's your comm strategy. How many of you folks have that at home? Go ahead, 26th of February. This is where a conversation occurs with Mr. Barney and Mr. Vernon, and Mr. Barney says, I talked to Lonnie. He's getting the silencers. That ought to cause you some pause. Lonnie's not a class 3, right? And it's irrefutable in this case because Mr. Barney admitted that they were told by Mr. Olson, Fulton's a class 3, right? He's going to get it under the table. They have a discussion about it in the car on the way over to buy these things. Class 3 under the table, right? The charge is conspiracy to possess. Under the table, call it what you will. The fact that he didn't want one is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. The agreement is to possess them. The violation of the law is, here's the agreement, 4 corners of it. What's in the agreement? We want silencers. We know we're going to get silencers. We agree to do it, take an overt act to go there, to possess them. In a nutshell, that's what the violation's all about. And look at what he says, I'm going to get them under the table. Barney says, is this the guy that works on base? If so, I don't trust him either. I mean that what's that all about? He tried to say, it's somebody else, It's in a situation like that, you're talking about under the table silencer and you go, I don't trust this guy. You don't trust him for what reason, right? Because they're under the table. Maybe he'll tell somebody who knows. But that's what the man says. This is the day that Schaefer Cox gives the tutorial on how to make a silencer. I mean, his audio recording played in court with 2 experts shows you exactly what he did, right? He bought a fake one. He cut the slices in it, put it back together, shoved it in the shaving cream. You can smell it back there if you want. When you get the exhibit, you can still smell the menthol. So he does not only grenades 101, he does silencers 101 too. Those 2 counts of the silencers overwhelming. You're going to convict him on that because the evidence is overwhelming. Same with the machine gun. Keep going, please. Same with the conspiracy to possess grenades. Because look what he's talking about. He's talking about how much they cost. Can I get a volume discount on this? Can you see if old Bill can get a volume discount? If I buy more, will he drop the price? Order as many as you can get. Barney's, this is at the Esther Cabins, right? So Barney's there for this conversation. He's telling you, I only heard the tail end, but if you listen to the recording, you don't hear anybody walking around. Either he's there or he came down at the tail end. Either he knows there's a price discussion going on. But once again, it's like, I really wasn't there. I really didn't know. Like, oh, they probably didn't talk about it on the way back home. They probably didn't talk about it much on March the 9th. They probably didn't talk about it on March the 8th. They probably never talked about it at all. These meetings were some big surprise. How did this get there here? We talk about his reaction when they put that grenade in his hand in a moment. Doesn't stop there. 3 days later, order as many as you can get, more discount on prices. And what does Mr. Cox say on the recording? The defense would have you believe that Mr. Cox said, hey, what I said, I'm going to come back for guerrilla war. I'm going to come back and join the guerrilla war. Rubbish. The gorilla in the room is right there. Because all things he's got, all the things he says, all the things he does makes him one. The facts established. It's not about coming back and joining the war because who else is going? Nobody else is talking about it except him. Go ahead. What happens toward the end with Mike Anderson, right? Olson's pushing to get the list. There's a reason for that. Anderson doesn't want to give it up to Schaefer Cox. He doesn't want to give it up to Olson. He won't give it to the Vernons. Karen Vernon calls him. Remember he testified about that? Said, some older women called me. He knows the Vernons, I guess, not well, but he knows of them. She calls and asks for it. He's like, I'm not giving it to you. Schaefer tries to get it from him. Schaefer Cox even calls his buddy and says, hey, I want that database. I want the database. He's preparing to leave the state, right? Don't believe this. It's like, I'm leaving the country. I'm going to make my sovereign citizen declaration and leave the country. The recordings establish he's going out, but more than likely he's heading to Montana with all his gear, right? He's not leaving the country. By this time, Anderson has decided when he gets a call from Gerald Olson, he's going to trash the list. He had it. He's had it. He's done. He's getting out. So what does he do? He does 2 things to guarantee it'll never see the light of day. One, he scrubs it with a forensic tool of some sort, and he takes it out and smashes it with a hammer into a million different pieces. And he throws it in the dumpster. Gone, lost forever. So we asked him, how many people were on the list, Mr. Anderson? Was like more than a dozen? Yep. Believe he said mostly state. That's fine. We've got some feds up here. We just showed you on that exhibit. Go ahead. And why did he do it? He did it because he doesn't trust his motives. He didn't think any good would come out of it given the circumstances that were going on at the time. So what happens on the 23rd of March? Get a recording from Mr. Cox to Olson. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm going to stop here on page 56. Page 56, I'm stopping.
This is Global.
All right, I'm picking back up again with page 56 on day 22. So what happens on the 23rd of March? Get a recording from Mr. Cox to Olson. I'm sorry, March the 8th. Exhibit 32, March the 8th. Cox says, I talked to our friend that we were looking for the other day, Mike Anderson. Olson says, okay. Cox, and I have to talk to you about it in person. He's pretty chickened out even from me. Oh yeah, really? Cox, yeah. Olson, yeah. Cox, I'll give you the rundown of what all he said, but that's not looking like that's going to be any help there. That's what the guy over there is saying, not an option there, huh? Says Cox, but it's not likely he's got a monopoly or anything that can't be achieved the same way. In other words, we can get it ourselves, right? Indiscernible. Not going to be an obstacle to him in his database information collection system. On the 9th, not before the arrest, we talk about canned goods, which is these are canned goods. This could be a canned good. Most likely is this vernacular for silencer. Go ahead. And then we get to March. There we go, March 10th. This sale to Lonnie and Karen Vernon, they both contributed money towards it. They both knew that was going on with it. They both conspired to get this. They both conspired because Schaefer Cox sent them down to the Millennial Millennium Hotel to get grenades. When he talked about silencers, right? He gets grenades. He knows that they're getting grenades. He talked about it with them. He talked about Coleman Barney about getting silencers from Gerald Olson or from Bill Fulton. He's talking about that. There's the interconnectivity there. There's a communication piece, right? Purchase price for a grenade, 2 grenades, and a silencer, $750. Karen Vernon pulls the money out. She must have all 20s because she asked Lonnie for a 10. Lonnie flips a 10 to her. And the thing is that in terms of intent, even though you don't need to have to have a conspiracy charge, you don't need to have this in their hand or sale completed, because don't forget, the agreement is what controls here. But Lonnie Vernon is giddy about these things. He's excited, and that's what makes it dangerous. This wasn't something about, we'll keep these in our back pocket until necessary. He thinks this is pretty slick. You can watch it again. You've seen it at least once. He's very pleased to have all these things. Olson tells him, and he says, these things are blasters, right? He says, these smoke grenades? And Olson says, no, these are blasters. Yeah, his wife says, these will do the job, right? And don't forget, this is a couple that already in their car, they've got the suicide letters written, they've got the goodbye letters written, JR, it was great working with you in the cause of liberty. We hope we haven't died in vain. We're not going to go down licking their jackboots. We're going to cure any lead deficiency they might have, right? You don't think, well, let me rephrase that. Had some trooper pulled these people over the way he talks about killing 5 zeros with grenades, somebody would have died, given that was going on with Lonnie Vernon at the time. He's ready to go to battle. He was waiting for it as part of this militia. This wasn't a rogue Lonnie Vernon. It was a militia Lonnie Vernon, right? Schaefer Cox and Coleman Barney, the second time they're told in the car, this is going to be under the table by J.R. Olson. The second time it doesn't make any difference, right? On the way, at a minimum, Coleman Barney knows that grenades are in the offing. They're going to be on the table, because Olson tells him, I got some military grenades, and his response is, that's cool. He testified here, a couple of days ago, said, oh, that's cool. That was referring to the silencers. That's another one of these, I didn't mean to say what you think I said. But that's just as important. It is what he didn't say. And what did he say? He's not like, whoa, grenades, I'm not up for that, man. I didn't sign up with the APM to hold a live grenade in my hand while, Schaefer bought it. Would tend to make a guy nervous holding something like this. Didn't make him nervous. We submit it didn't make him nervous for a couple of reasons. 1, wanted it. 2, expected it. 3, was used to it. See any nervousness there? He could have, Olson does one of these things. You've seen the video twice. You can replay it in your head, puts it up, guy grabs it. There's none of this like, hey man, I'm not into high explosive. This is a family militia, but I will inspect the silencer for a long time. Take a look at that and see if that's something I want. See if it's something I want to make work. See if I can use this in my 22 or put this in my FN, right? Talks about that. How can we make this work? While Fulton tells him it's not going back to Phil, it's staying here. Okay, how can we make this work? Are we going to register it after the fact? Who's going to do the registration? Who's the ultimate authority in Fairbanks? Who's going to sign off on a registration to this for these guys? Remember? Take a guess. Burt Barack, head of the troopers. You think he's going to sign off? No, he's not going to sign off. What else is important is what else does Coleman Barney say about these things, right? He says they're 22s. Mr. Cox says, oh, well, that's gay. I've already got a silenced 22. There's another admission you can bank on your conviction on. What does Mr. Barney say? How are they for devastation? I don't think we're talking about goose. I don't think we're talking about shooting foxes in the chicken coop, because before that, you'll recall Schaefer Cox says 22s take a long time to die. Remember that? Take a long time to die. Who are we talking about? Killing somebody? And then where does the conversation go? You can only explain things away so much, but where does the conversation go next? Got to go in close. We'll go in light. We'll go in light with a 22, right? We're going to go in light and quick, and you got to get in close. You got to get in deep. Schaefer says, well, this helps with the element of escape, right? We're talking about killing people with these things by stealth, by premeditation. This isn't some conversation like, maybe we should stop and register these things, or should maybe, do this some other way. We're going to deal We are doing this deal in some warehouse in Fairbanks in the middle of winter with this guy with an under the table of stuff. Coleman's got $5,000 in his pocket, and he's got an excuse for the $5,000 granted. But you know what? It doesn't matter. The $5,000 doesn't matter. It's charged as $5,000 for extra stuff. Okay, granted. So you're going to your check. You're going to bounce. You're going to pay. You're going to take money back and cover that check for your nephew, your relative, Mr. Marchbanks, right? Great. Under the law of conspiracy, it doesn't matter because it's the agreement to possess, not the agreement. They're not charged with agreement to purchase. They're not charged with agreement to complete a sale. They're charged with conspiring to possess these things. That's what the violation of the law is. Go ahead. What does he do when this poor guy shows up at the doorstep or the side of the car, right, Mr. Unlucky? I don't know what else to call him, right? And this guy shows up in the middle of an illegal arms sale, and what does Coleman do? He's like, this is not going to look good. You know, we dropped the grenade here. We put the silenced pistol here. Why is that? What's the phrase? It was an awkward moment. I submit it was probably a real awkward moment, right? A couple of grenades in the car, a silenced pistol in somebody else's lot. Pretty awkward. It's more awkward when the FBI shows up, right? And we told you the story, right? We got to get these guys, and they're saying, hey, this guy shows up unannounced. What's the Bureau going to do, you know? The guy in the car is going like, oh, my God, I see him coming. And they freak out. Well, they don't freak out, but it's a dangerous situation. You got an uncontrolled guy there. Who knows who he is? You got a source in the car, so they had to take the case down. There was no other choice, right? So the sale wasn't perfected, but under the law of conspiracy, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't. Nor the 5,000. Go ahead. Serpent Scrocky. Okay, I've been told I got 5 minutes before noon, so I better hurry up, and I will. Talked about this before. Mr. Vernon, there's a picture of him in his wallet pulling out the money. The wife pays. Mr. Vernon pays one, you know, gives him money as well. Actually, the bulk of it. This completes the deal, and he was sent down to do in February of 2011. Perfected the deal in agreement for silencers and grenades. Go ahead. In count one, when you get to the indictment, you're going to see that we've got, you know, the conspiracies between these three gentlemen here. 3 defendants to possess silencers, grenades, and destructive devices. Destructive devices being the Hornet's Nest launcher, right? Grenades are grenades, and silencers. Goes back from August to March. Go ahead. Count 12 is the other conspiracy count. So you got 2. One, murdering federal officials. Second one with the firearm stuff. We'll just call it firearms for those 3 items, right? Again, August to March 10th of 2011. Go ahead. KJNP. This also covers solicitation for Mr. Cox. We're looking at what volunteers. And what does he say? That we have to be prepared to kill and stomp them through the ice. We do a pre-op plan in his home on at least 2 occasions. Olson's there for one. Other folks are there for the other because Barney told you so. Barney Thessing did the writing. We have a pre-op plan, federal assassins, right? Barney's got the Hornet's Nest loaded with his 37mm launcher. He's carrying 4 clips. Brockman's got 4 clips. We submit intent to kill. It's not for practice. Mr. Vernon's got his .223, which is an evidence. You can match it to the picture at KJNP. You can see specifics of that firearm in that firearm. There's a sight and there's some ridges on his gun. You can do that. Anderson's got the federal database. We got notes in Mr. Cox's phone from February 2010 that says hit list. What did he tell you about hit list? You guys remember that? It's like my top 10 militia parade songs, right? That's my hit list. This is for the songs I'm putting in there. You know, you're not going to believe that because it's not true. Cox wants this list up until March the 7th, 3 days before his arrest, and he tells Olson over the course of this investigation that he's got everybody's name on it. Go ahead. We need to show you for these 2 counts we have an agreement. All 3 became a member knowing one of the objectives and intending to help accomplishment, killing, possessing of firearms, right? Third, 1 overt act. The overt acts were listed for you when Judge Bryan read them. There's a lot of them, and they're all established by the evidence in this case. I don't have enough time to go through all of them again. You've already heard them. I'm not going to insult your intelligence. They're there. The evidence supports all of those overt acts. The only one we'll concede as an issue is Mr. Barney's issue with the money. He says he's got that covered. That's fine. But again, it's irrelevant. Go ahead. Let's come back to that all right. At 1 o'clock. We're only going to take an hour, folks, so be ready and come back to court at 1. I think they've arranged for you to eat in today, so we'll have time. Their lunches, Judge. Don't discuss the case with each other. Judge, their lunches are in the deliberating room waiting for them. Pardon? Their lunches are waiting for them Oh, in the deliberating room. All rise. This matter in recess until 1 p.m. Court recessed until 12:02 until 1:04 p.m. Jury not present. The clerk, all rise. His dishonorable. The court, the United States Dishonorable District Court is again in session. The dishonorable court, please be seated, ready to proceed. Serpent Scrocky, yes, sir. The court, okay, Mr. Scrocky, you may continue as the jury comes in. Jury present at 1:05 p.m. The dishonorable court, all right, all right, all right. Please give your attention to Mr. Scrocky, who may continue with argument. Serpent Scrocky, thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon again. So when you broke before lunch, we were at the conspiracy elements, and I want to revisit real quick. Is one thing that I said to you was that with respect to the overt acts, that we have them all proven to you beyond a reasonable doubt. We'd argue, we'd assert that we have done that through the facts of this case. But the point is, in terms of the instructions, is that you only need to find one. So even though we submit that they all have been proven above and beyond a reasonable doubt, in terms of your deliberation as to counts 1 and 12, you just need to find one and agree on that unanimously. So I just wanted to clear that up. Okay, Sean, we're looking at in terms of counts 7 and 8, these are what we call using and carrying during and in relation to a crime of violence. So the crimes of violence in this count being count 1, the conspiracy to possess firearms, and count 12, which is going to be count 1 and count 12. We'll get to that in a second. But count 1 with relation to Mr. Barney and Mr. Cox carrying firearms at KJ&P. Same thing with count 12. Again, they're both carrying firearms during and in relation to the crimes of violence, which is a conspiracy to commit murder. So essentially what you're looking at here is just, are they carrying a gun during and in relation to count 1 and count 12? That's really all that boils down into in terms of those instructions and those charges. Go ahead. The elements for those two are for 7 and 8, committed to a crime of violence or committed to the crime of conspiracy to possess unregistered silencers and destructive devices, right? As in count 1. Second, that they knowingly carried the firearms. There's no dispute about that. They did that during and in relation to that crime. They did that as well. They are both armed. Both said so and admitted that element. And additionally, carrying it means knowingly possessed and held, moved, conveyed, or transported in some manner or in his person or in a vehicle. And carried during and in relation to the crime of violence means facilitated or played a role in that. And in this, both of these two counts, the role being that it provides protection and or it also provides use and force of that event shooting a federal law enforcement officer. So that's what those elements for carrying in connection to a crime of violence stand for. Go ahead, Sean. In terms of the firearm counts or the weapons counts for the Hornet's Nest launchers and the grenades, in terms of the grenades being the pieces or parts that were found in Mr. Barney's trailer, as you can see from this slide, that is found, hold on, that is found in Mr. Barney's trailer. As you can see from the slide, that is what is found in Mr. Barney's trailer. All this material belongs to Schaefer Cox. You've got ammunition cans, you've got ammo, you've got the 40 rounds of OCS spray, 30 caliber crank machine gun. You've got the bottom, the holdout grenade holes, and more particularly, go ahead, Sean, you've got the components for the destructive devices in terms of the ones that are built with the components. So in the upper boxes you see here in the upper left-hand side or in the upper right-hand side, that's the box that Mr. Whitley talked to you about, where they are found, the JB Weld and those cardboard boxes in connection with the live fuses, in connection with the powder, in connection with the grenade hole. If you add those pieces and components together, that equals your live grenade, right? And that's been testified to with what would be a destructive device under the law, because the components and pieces were in close proximity. As the FBI demonstrated in one of their tests, it's easy to put together. You put the smokies in the grenade, screw it in, you put the powder in, you seal it with JB Weld, you pull the fuse, it's going to go boom. The evidence we submit is that Mr. Cox, of course, talked about this on a number of occasions. He gave you the Grenade 101 speech at 2 separate occasions. He understands how to do it. He wants to do it. Mr. Barney has been indicated with doing practice grenade tosses with Mr. Cox, and all these items are at Mr. Barney's trailer. Mr. Barney admitted that he knows those grenades are pieces in the trailer. You can infer circumstantially that Mr. Barney knew these other pieces, the fuses, since he's been implicated in using them. The grenade holes, he said, he's seen them in there. You can infer from where it was found what did these men did with each other before they were arrested, that he knows about the black powder, he knows about the fuses, he knows about the intention to use them, because that's what they're talking about, and that's what they ended up being arrested for on March the 10th, was to acquire real ones. You can infer from the evidence that he knows that these items are in the trailer. He has possession of the trailer. He has ownership of the trailer. Mr. Cox in other words, he's aiding and abetting Mr. Cox with the items that are in the trailer. It's Mr. Barney's trailer as well. So you can infer from all those pieces of evidence as well as their association through the course of this case, that everybody knows what's going on with respect to those grenade holes and those grenade pieces and the black powder and the fuses in the trailer. Go ahead. I'm going to skip this slide. Since I used up a lot of time, we've already talked about that. Go ahead. The other thing I want to talk to you about is that we have a total of 19 grenade bodies here. Right. There's no evidence that we're running a shop here to create it or present, the grenade complaint department thing. And they're going to make these things into some sort of joke or novelty item. The other thing is that think about where they were found. Think about where the circumstances. How were they found, and under the circumstances they were found? What's Mr. Cox doing, right? He's got all the things that are important to him in that trailer. Got family stuff. He's got his work stuff. He's got his mission stuff. Had these been unimportant, most likely, if you're leaving the state, you might have left them at home. But the significance of where they were found under the circumstances should resonate with you, that these were important to him. The live fuses were important, and the black powder was important. All those whole were important. So you've got 19. We've got 19 of those, and we've got found in connection with 40 of these 37 millimeter munitions. They could do bad things to people. So one of the things you can do when you think about this is, like, okay, it's found there. What significance does it have? It has significance just because of itself. When you think about it in the context of what Mr. Cox was doing, those things were pretty important to him, right? And they were important to him enough that he took them from his home, put them in the trailer, kept the fuses with him, and he's going on a road trip. Some of those things could have been left behind. If they weren't that important, they would have been left behind. A piece about when we're strong enough. That's your 40, 37 millimeter munitions. Mr. Barney knew or testified that, he had 37 millimeter launch at his house, used one at KJ&P. He got a 37 millimeter Hornet's Nest grenade from the Bradway shack before KJ&P. He had been there before. He had a key to that place. All of these things were stuffed in his trailer. He testified he knew those things were in his trailer. He's at least had one of those launchers on his rifle. And the reason they're in his trailer is because Mr. Cox is leaving and he's helping him to do that. Testified he was helping him to leave the state. So he's going to help his commander out, put those in the trailer, and let them go with him. We submit an awful amount in volume of either offensive or defensive munitions to carry around. Okay, I'm going to stop here on page 71 of day 22. Page 71 of day 22. We submit an awful amount in volume of either offensive or defensive munitions to carry around. And for what purpose? Is for when we become strong enough. That's the bottom line. Here's another photo. And I have a note at the bottom that Mr. Galbraith from the ATF testified without doubt that the 37 millimeter launcher, when used in conjunction with the Hornet's Nest grenade or being loaded with one, does equal a destructive device under the law. And that's your instruction. So when Mr. Barney admits to having that at KJMP, he's guilty of that charge. Next, please. This is the text that I referred to earlier that Mr. Cox, in the right-hand side, states on the 23rd, or the 24th of November in the middle. Well, yes, we have 10 guys in the house. If we keep a gun close, I'll keep a gun close. That is enough, I think. AR-15 at the top of the steps with a Hornet's Nest. So on that night, at a minimum, Mr. Cox had one in possession. He's testified that, we had evidence that he knows what those are and what they do to people. They fold you up like a pretzel. He has knowledge of the characteristics of that Hornet's Nest round and what it does to people, and had one in possession on the night of the 24th at a minimum, as well as knowing that Mr. Barney had one on the night of KJ&P because he gave it to them. And that was what the testimony was. Talked about that. Go ahead. The elements of the destructive device charges in count 2, knowing possession. That could be readily possessed, readily assembled into a destructive device, such as a grenade. They intended to use the combination of parts as a weapon. I don't think we've established that beyond any doubt. That's what they were talking about doing with these things. Third, not registered. Let me reread that sentence. I think we've established that beyond any doubt. That's what they were talking about doing with these things. Third, not registered. There is no registration of these parts with respect to these destructive devices. Fourth, they knew the combination of the parts either designed or intended for use in converting a device. Am I in your way could be readily assembled into a hand grenade. Other words, they had the knowledge that this would be assembled into a hand grenade. And when you look at the pieces and parts found in the trailer as they were found, it's pretty commonsensical to know that you could screw the fuse in, plug it up, put some black powder and then plug it up, and then use that as a grenade. It doesn't take a lot of imagination to figure that out. Lastly, it does not matter whether the defendants knew that combination of parts were registered or had been registered. We don't have to prove that element to you. The possession instruction is as follows. A person has possession of something if the person knows of its presence, has physical control over it, or knows of its presence and has the power and intention to control it. More than one person can be in possession of something if each knows of its presence and has the power to control. So in other words, you don't have to own something to possess it, right? Doesn't have to be an ownership issue. It's a knowledge issue. And if in this case, Mr. Cox has possession both literally and figuratively, those are his items in the trailer. All those grenades, pieces, and parts. Mr. Barney's trailer. We submit he knows of those things since he loaded those holes into the trailer and knew that they were in there. He's testified to that, and that Mr. Cox, by virtue of his ownership and Mr. Barney's assistance with the trailer, he has ownership and possession of those as well, because they're found inside. 9, 10, and 11 concern again the hornet's nest, and we've talked about this in some detail already. So in terms of these instructions, go ahead. We have to show knowingly possessed a destructive device. In other words, the hornet's nest, he testified to that. Mr. Cox has provided evidence in terms of his knowledge of those, that those were his, gave it to Mr. Barney. Device was not registered. There's no evidence of that anything in this case was registered by any of the defendants, whether they were talking about a machine gun or the washer with the hornet's nest or a grenade. Third, they knew it was a launcher with the hornet's nest round. That has been established. And fourth, it doesn't matter whether they knew or not whether it had to be registered as a destructive device. So you don't have to worry about that because the evidence, it doesn't, in terms of an element, it's not something that we have to prove. Go ahead. The 2 counts for Mr. Cox on making possession of the silencer. We've already talked about the Silencer 101 tutorial found in his trailer. He's admitted to it. He stated he didn't know it had to be registered. He's admitted to making it. You heard him on the tape admitting to making it. He's guilty of that charge. He's also guilty of not having that silencer registered because it wasn't. That's pretty much the end of the facts on those. So that evidence has been overwhelmingly established that Mr. Cox is guilty of those 2 counts, all right? Real quick in terms of the elements. Knowing possession, we've got that established. Not registered. He knew it was a silencer. He talked about it and he made it. And fourth, we don't need to show whether he knew he had to register it or not, all right? And so National Firearms Act. There's been some testimony in terms of, what do you have to do with respect to registering these things? Why is it important? And essentially all we're talking about here is that to possess it, you got to get a stamp. You got to fill out the paperwork. You got to go to the ATF. They got to do a background. It takes a long time to do, a couple of months, 6 to 8 months. And you got to pay your $200, right? And it has. So you have to be registered. And the point of the matter is that in terms of law enforcement perspective, in the event there's an allegation of a silenced weapon being used, you can check the database. And the reason for that is these things are inherently dangerous. They're classified as dangerous items. They're classified, the buying of them is classified as a crime of violence. There are legitimate uses for them. No one's debating that. No one's saying they should be outlawed or that they don't have useful purposes. But as long as they're registered, you're good to go. All these men, in this case, as you heard, spent a lot of time talking about firearms. They're knowledgeable about them. Mr. Cox promotes the Second Amendment Task Force. He knows about the law. Mr. Vernon's a gun guy. Mr. Barney's a gun guy. And it wouldn't take much, had they wanted to go through this process. The evidence establishes in this case that in Fairbanks there are people who sell National Firearms Act guns. One of them, Mr. Barney's wife, bought a gun from. How hard would it have been, instead of doing under the table, off the record sale with Gerald Olson via Bill Fulton, would it have been to go to Protec? Would it have been to go to Protec a long time ago? What do the under the table sell in the parking lot at Fairbanks in the middle of the winter, then go back to Protec? Because then it leaves a record, right? Some people don't want records left, and they do that for a reason. This case, there are plenty of other legal options and easier options to pursue, and they didn't do that. And we submit they did that for a reason, because they didn't want the paper trail. And anybody who wanted to do this a long time ago, Mr. Cox could have registered his silencer a long time ago. Mr. Barney was that interested. He could have gone around, searched the internet, gone around Fairbanks, talked to people, and gotten one a long time ago. But instead, consider this, that what he didn't do, having been advised that these things were going to be under the table, he kept going. He did that for a reason. 2. Mr. Cox made the silencer, plain and simple. He had a DVD on how to make them. There were things found at his house as to how to make silencers, and there were items found in his house in terms of how to convert semi-automatic into automatic weapons, right? They all had warnings on them. The ones we picked to show you, from those 2 DVDs. He said that somebody else had dropped into his home. They were spam, right? Visitors spam. They had warnings on them. If you do this stuff, you might get in trouble, right? National Firearms Act's warnings. So you got plenty of knowledge as to what you can do and what you can't. Same thing applies to machine gun, right? The 9mm. On the tape, Mr. Cox says, I've got one, it's sentimental. It's full auto. Mike Anderson, it's fully auto. FBI's test is the 9mm Sten. It's fully auto. And again, Mr. Cox has on these DVDs in his home instructions on how to make machine guns fully automatic. So those 2 counts, or that count, is totally satisfied by the evidence. So you need to find him guilty on that. That's the conclusion you are all going to have to reach. Go ahead, keep going, keep going. We have Mr. Cox talking about fully automatic weapons with James Havens. He tries to order 5. This is in November of 2010, right? So this is going back a ways. This is pre-KJNP. And he's also concerned about people listening because he's got tapped phone. And even text, sorry. So he's still trying to avoid detection, right? In the Vernon home, a quasi-arsenal, a lot of guns, a lot of ammunition. We've already talked about Mr. Vernon's circumstances. We have the device there at the bottom that's made by a clothespin and a couple of bullet casings and some wires coming out of it. A triggering device of some sort. You pull out a string, the 2 pieces make a connection, and you make a circuit. Just an interesting piece. Why someone puts that together is unknown, but it's an interesting piece in terms of if you pull the piece out and something's going on to connect, and something's going to connect to something else, and there you go. On top of all the ammunition and firearms that Mr. Vernon has in his house, as well as the statements, so you've got a plethora of evidence that we found in his home with respect to his intentions about what he's going to do, where he's going to go ahead. And also, there were also found in his car, the SKS he carried at KJNP was in his car. He had another semi-automatic weapon in his car full of ammunition. And in the car also, again, that I have to reiterate, were the goodbye letters that they drafted to all their relatives, a stack about that thick, which goes to show you that their intentions were at the end of the day, after they got those grenades and those silencers. You don't draft goodbye letters to all your loved ones without meaning it, and that something's going to happen. This is Mr. Vernon's 223, which is subject to one of the counts of possession of firearm, committing a crime of violence. He's using that weapon at KJNP. If you look at the firearm, you'll have a chance to look at it back in the jury room. You'll see the vents on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side of the picture, you can see the vents toward the barrel up at the top, and you can see the scope. That's the same as both firearms depicted in those photographs, because the scope's the same thing. It's got some lit fiber optic on the top, and you can match it up with that same weapon. You can match it up and show that's the same weapon. The photograph on the left, on the right-hand side, is a picture of Mr. Vernon at KJNP taken by Ken Thessing. Okay. Vernon's Sovereign Citizen Declaration, same mindset as Mr. Cox. Next, the goodbye letters, there's a draft at the bottom there, a writing at the bottom from Karen Vernon. Go ahead. Mr. Cox's DVD on how to make a silencer, purchased in January of 2008. That's 2008. That goes back a long ways. Well, before any involvement with Mr. Olson, Mr. Fulton, or anybody, go ahead. As I keep running through the evidence here, this is just a 10,000-foot level on Mr. Cox's phone and computer. We've got YouTube searches for ammonium nitrate bomb. Ammonium nitrate, remember, is a material tannerite. A number of 11 pounds or so were found in the trailer, and it's made up of ammonium nitrate. There's the acts of war list, researching judges, peacemaker militia documents, Far North Tactical web pages. So he's looking for things from Far North Tactical, from the store that who the guy is supposed to be killing him. We've already talked about the hit list, which he's explained as deals with, songs for the militia. The Ranger equipment list. We went over a couple of days ago with Mr. Barney, did yesterday. I guess goes by pretty quick, and a proposed order for Judge Quivar for $1.5 million. There's also in his computer a list of documents for tactical training. We don't have a slide for you for those, and I've lost my page. And I want to, if I can find it, I'll pull it up in rebuttal. But it has combat training tactics that are in for Mr. Cox that he obtained from somebody. And it tells you how to do combat tactics and training for members of his militia. Go ahead. And Mr. Vern, there are a list of what was found in the computers. On Mr. Vernon's computer, the Denny's Trial Judgment, the Homeland Security Field Operations Guide. On Mr. Thessing's computer, he's a member of the APM. We found the grand jury de jure APM emails and the photo of Lonnie Vernon. That's the KJNP. He was styled. That's tactical style photo that we just saw. On Mr. Barney's computer, District Attorney search results for Burt Brack, Judge McConaughey, search results at Google Map, and Alaska Peace Officer Association information. Go ahead. And Mr. Cox's computer, there are the manuals I'm talking about. Each one of those is full auto conversion manual. Some of them have National Firearms Act's warnings on them. Okay, I've got to page 81. I'm going to pause here on page 81 of day 22. All right, starting with page 81, day 22. Some of them have National Firearms Act's warnings on them. Those came from the DVDs and also from his computer itself. Go ahead. Mr. Barney's house. On the left is Mr. Barney's go bag, as was testified to. Semi-automatic machine gun, radios, magazines. On the upper right is the box where the 37mm launcher was found, with the 37mm, the 100 blanks that you could fill out and put in whatever you wished. In the bottom right is Mr. Cox's vest, fully loaded magazines, and the 2 CS grenades that we spoke about during the trial. Go ahead. Talked about that. Go ahead. Count 16, solicitation. Next slide. This concerns Mr. Cox's solicitation of members of his militia, Mr. Vernon, Mr. Barney, and others. Mr. Brockman, anybody at KJNP for solicitation to commit murder? The elements of this are that the defendant, in other words, Mr. Cox, had the intent that another person engage in conduct constituting murder of an officer of the United States. We submit that the instructions, the asking for people who would kill, you heard Mr. Cox's voice talking to Gerald Olson at a pre-briefing at his home, that we need guys who are willing to kill and we need guys who are willing to stomp these assassins through the ice. And we submit that when you say things like that, we need to stomp their bodies through the ice. You're not going to be calling troopers and saying, hey, you know what, we had an op plan, and these federal guys showed up and we tried to stop them and it didn't work, so we killed them. And we're reporting that to you guys. That's not what he said. What he said on the recording was we need guys who are willing to kill so we can stomp their bodies through the ice, because they'll leave them. We'll put one of those soulless assassins, under the water, and that'll take care of it. Our position is, based on that evidence, that's a solicitation to commit murder. It's not about the whiteboard. It's not about those details. It's about what's going on in his mind. What everybody else heard about, what everybody else wrote about is their business. What's going on in his mind is that if they show up, they're going to die. And we expect everybody who was on that detail, they all left their homes. They all left their cars. They all left with arms. And they all went up armored up with the understanding that at some point that evening someone could have died. You're going to hear a lot about self-defense down the road, and that's their right, that's fine. But the bottom line here is that in Schaefer Cox's mind, he's seeking people who are going to be willing to kill for him, right? Not for anybody else, but for him in the event these federal assassins show up. So the second element requires circumstances. Must be strongly corroborative of that intent. And those circumstances are: show up for me with all your stuff and be prepared to kill federal agents. And third, solicited, commanded, induced, and otherwise endeavored to persuade another person to commit the murder of an officer of the United States. That element has already been covered by what I just told you. And didn't happen just once, right? We're talking about two different details. Okay, I'm going to stop here on page 83. Hey, babe, this is for you. Okay, sorry about that. I can't really pause it. I only had to stop it, and we didn't get very far anyway. And that didn't happen just once, right? We're talking about two different details here. One at KJNP and one supposedly happening the morning before. That was canceled by the ice storm downtown in Fairbanks. The weather canceled that one. So we're talking about two different acts that would generate facts sufficient to find him guilty on count 16. Let me check my notes here real quick before I get to the last slide. A couple of things that I want to mention is that I mentioned before lunch that Mr. Barney had $5,000 on him, and he has an explanation as to the $5,000. I was going to go to the bank. I didn't go to the bank. I went to the arms sale first, but I was going to go deposit that. The evidence that we presented during the course of the investigation from the search of the Barney household was that he had $10,000 in his house in cash. I believe he testified that as well on direct. But in circumstances like that, your guy's recollection is what controls, not what I'm telling you. But our recollection is that he testified to it, and our agent testified as to the search of his home. There was $10,000 in cash. Mr. Cox mentioned in Mr. Vernon's home that all the battling that was going to happen, actually he mentioned it to Mr. Olson, was that the battling was going to happen in houses, not out in the open fields. When you put the other evidence that we have in the case in context of what kind of statement, that shows where his intentions are in terms of the list where people live. They were going to be going into people's houses. Mr. Vernon, in the same time frame, made mention of people dangling like the wind chimes of liberty, just like Mr. Cox. Mr. Cox is in the bus talking about, Martin Guerrero and Ron Woods, dangling like the wind chimes of liberty, and he just says it and gets away with it. And his number two, the major in the militia, doesn't say anything in response to that, like, hey boss, what do you mean by that? That sends you another message about where their mindset is. I talked about the 8 grenades that Mr. Olson mentioned, testified to seeing in the Bradway shed when they were moving the weapons out. Mr. Barney says he didn't see that. The issue with that is that a week after that, Mr. Cox, it was where Mr. Cox says we're only using 2-second fuses, right? So it's very likely that Olson saw one of those grenades with the 2-second fuses. And you got a statement by Mr. Cox, independent of anything, stating after that, we've got grenades with fuses on them. So they're someplace, though that's who he's referencing. That's something you can infer that those were those grenades. Last slide, then I'm done. I appreciate you guys bearing with me on this. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Slide says what the instruction says. The common sense English vernacular about what all that means is that you don't leave your life experiences outside at the door. You don't check all your common sense out at the door. It doesn't mean proof beyond all doubt. Doesn't mean 110%. Doesn't mean 10%. And I can tell you legal scholars a lot smarter than me have been debating about what that means for a long time. And that's maybe why it's such an interesting and maybe perfect way to charge the jury with, with the standard of proof is. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. So that's our burden. That's what we have to prove to you on all elements as to all counts. So keep that in mind over the next couple of hours. And again, the burden is ours. And so after defense counsel are done with their presentations, I get to come back and give one more piece in rebuttal. And at that time, I will be asking you that we've proven the case beyond a reasonable doubt as to all elements, and that you'll find the defendants guilty of all the crimes charged in this indictment. Thank you. Thank you, the dishonorable court. Thank you, Mr. Serpent Scrocky. Now, ladies and gentlemen, why don't you stand up and stretch while Mr. Traverso gets set up for an argument? Mr. Traverso, can you hear me, Madam Clerk? The clerk, I can, thank you. The court, the dishonorable court, all right. Folks, please give your attention to Mr. Traverso, who may offer argument on behalf of Mr. Cox. Closing argument of Defendant Cox by Mr. Traverso. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just going to give you some themes that I want you to consider. I know that you've been here for 5 weeks and you took copious notes of what the testimony was in this case. I'd like to start out with, we are all part of a system that our constitutional heritage oversees since the founding of the young United States of America. This is drummed in us at an early age, and we take note of it when we encounter challenges to improprieties, transgressions, and heavy-handed issues. that arise on the national, state, and local and very, very local boundaries that cross our paths. Perhaps the most important right is the freedom of speech and the right to assembly. We are faced in this case whether a young man whose views and methods of engagement tackle our sense of courteous manner on how to confront those issues. While on the one hand we have a young man who passionately and provocatively articulates issues, we also have a young man who mouths off his opposition and fear with statements that we find rude, distasteful, and mouthy. Here are the prominent ones that we've had in this case. We have you outmanned and outgunned, and we could have you all dead in one night, but I am a man of peace. I may be morally justified to go and drill a couple rounds in the head of McConaughey, but I do not find that necessary. I could put that head in a box and send it. We could hang judges from the wind chimes of liberty. He would call someone a Nazi who was minding her own business in a line at a pharmacy. And then there's Judge Quavar's hearing. There are militia guys who'd just as soon kill you in the middle of the night than to come to court and argue with you. And while this is distasteful, he said this in reference to Mr. Fulton and Mr. Barney. Number 6, the question isn't whether you will die for liberty, but whether you will kill for liberty. Sounds awful, but that is in the context of when unlawful behavior is someone, whether law enforcement or any other party, is in control during martial law. That speech, how offensive as it is protected under our Constitution. It is ugly, but not the stuff of government overthrow. It is the stuff of an agitator, a civil disobedient, and advocate of change. While Coleman Barney is a mild-mannered fighter for liberty, Schaefer is a I'm-in-your-face activist. The bottom line is, isn't this case really about the government trying to silence someone whose speeches are provocative? From February 2010 to August of 2010, Agent Sutherland stated that the government opened a preliminary investigation with a termination date of August 2008 to 2010. Well, that makes no sense because he began an elaborate investigation in the August of 2010 by having Mr. Olson join the militia at the commissioning ceremony in the same month the investigation was supposedly going to conclude. Mr. Cox was on the radar of the FBI, and they knew he spoke of being ready for a speculative collapse of the government, that the government would collapse on its own, and that is when we would need to protect ourselves from chaos. He never once in his speeches said he was ready to attack the government or bring it down to its knees. Never. He aroused thought, discussion, and energetic debate of the right to bear arms, the right to monitor those who monitor us, the right to form militias to protect one's family, the right to challenge legal authority, the right to challenge the political process as a candidate. His message created fear in the federal government, and the federal government likewise created fear in Francis Schaeffer Cox. Eventually his life would be under a microscope. His emails, his text messages, the meeting he organized, the speeches he made, and the activities that he was involved in. Getting old. He had approximately 600 names of his contact list on his cell phone. 600. Who is the person who's going to overthrow the government or who's going to kill law enforcement? Why isn't on those 600 contact lists and all the text messages, would them reveal anything of that nature? In all this incredible review of his communications, there's not a single directive to mobilize, issue weapons, and attack. Not a single grenade detonation. In June of 2010, his life changes course. 3 months after his DV case is settled, OCS investigates. They want to conduct an interview with a child who can barely talk. That's fine, but Schaeffer believed that he would want them to allow him to be present and to have the encounter videotaped or have an attorney present. Eventually, that gets worked out. But not before the government exploits this situation. Bill Fulton, a gentleman who we subpoenaed with a wide smile and a great suit, testified that he works as a government informant for multiple federal agencies, and he used a grand opening in Fairbanks as a means to contact Schaeffer Cox. The Far North Tactical Shop, also known as Blondie's, is owned by his very close friend, Aaron Bennett, who would later in this case say that his best friend, was trying to instigate conflict. The day before Blondie's, or the fundraiser at Pike's Landing, Bill Fulton holds himself out to be a licensed gun dealer. To everyone's mistaken belief, he wants Schaeffer to meet with him at Pike's Landing the day before. The purpose? To lay the seed for Schaeffer to foment acts against the government. Schaeffer is asked, where are the warrants? And Schaeffer is befuddled. He is unaware of what Fulton is talking about. There are warrants for a de jure indictment. This has nothing to do with case law. This is something to do with the groups that the government has referred to. This is a means to arrest judges and law enforcement persons. Schaefer talks to him about something completely different, a protective order, not a warrant. The meeting goes nowhere except Fulton plans to have Mr. Cox follow up the next day. Mr. Sutherland made it clear that Agent Klein and Espeland from Anchorage were supervising Mr. Fulton. At Far North Tactical, Fulton during the daytime is revving people up at the affair that Schaefer has a plan. Maria Rensel says he and Bennett kept talking about Schaefer was up to something. Schaefer is up to something? Well, the events of the day finish. A meeting in the evening is held. Bennett calls Schaefer and other people. Schaefer comes to the meeting. He was not there during the daytime events. All right, I'm going to pause here on page 91. Pausing on page 91 of day 22. Okay, picking up with page 91, day 22. Bennett had been told also by Fulton that Schaefer had a plan to do something. Schaefer gets there and he's confronted by Bill Fulton, his second in command. Les Zerby is there with him. Fulton asks, "What's your plan, Schaefer?" They say they have no plan to do something that Thursday. That was the date that was designated by Mr. Fulton. Bill Rensel says Schaefer looked like a deer caught in the headlights. Zerby speaks out and says there is no plan. And Bill Fulton lunges for him and threatens to cut his throat. But others are there to stop them. Fulton asserts that he has spent $30,000 on men and equipment to get Francis Schaefer Cox to take up arms against the government. No such thing. Schaefer tried to tell Fulton he's never had his nose punched and he's not about to engage in some fight with the government. The government's instigation failed in this phase 1 of their investigation, but their resources were about to start with phase 2. They did not establish an agreement to commit an unlawful objective, a conspiracy, so now phase 2 is implemented. But there was a hitch. The government never expected Schaefer with his wife Marty and son to go on base seeking help. And it doesn't matter a hoot what you call it, whether it's asylum or whatever. In his eyes, he was seeking help. Little did he know that shortly after leaving the base, federal officials went to the post and asked for a video of Schaefer's visit there and used language that would freeze anyone in their tracks. Schaefer had a battle with OCS according to this one person, and he's not going to let the state take his son, which would in turn cause a shootout that will, quote, fix the Schaefer-Cox problem, unquote. What the government did not know is that an MP, after hearing this, did what he thought was the right thing. He contacted the Cox family as soon as possible. Mr. Gibson did not know Francis Schaefer Cox in the beginning, but afterwards, yes, he became well acquainted with Schaefer. From that June event to the August cookout at the Barney residence, the government kept the Fulton option alive, but engaged a second informant who would, through the government's engineering, instigate from inside the militia. Agents Klein and Espeland, who were the case agents for Fulton, did not testify as to their direction, plan, and control of Mr. Fulton. Olson was Fairbanks-based and under the direction and control of Agent Sutherland, but Agent Sutherland would also testify as if he was not linked with a correct counterterrorism unit in Anchorage. Olson brings a ton of talent to his job. He's done danger field work as a drug dealer who can also rip off one person after another with an ingratiating manner. His sole mission is to get illegal weapons in the hands of militia leadership. That's his assignment. His life has been devoted to charmingly making you believe that he's there to help you. He even misrepresented his failure to pay taxes to the U.S. government. He conned the government and Schaefer, Coleman, and Lonnie. He called the shed of the Bradway property in North Pole, quote, a weapons cache. It was simply a shed with firearms, tools, landscaping equipment, and miscellaneous stuff. This was morphed into some secret hideaway for firearms. He lied that there were 8 live grenades in the shed. If that was the case, ladies and gentlemen, the government had all it needed. End of story. But they discovered a glitch somewhere. The most important thing to remember is most of the items from that shed were packed in a trailer with belongings of the Cox family, and they were wrapped in bubble wrap. The most important thing to remember about Mr. Olson is that when he came from the statewide militia conference on February the 6th and reported the events there to Schaefer, which is Super Bowl Sunday, he conveyed the frustration of Fulton and others down there with Schaefer not pushing ahead with the battle plan. On February 12th, without one single communication before that day on paper at any meeting, Schaefer opens the meetings discussing 241. Why? Because when Mr. Olson came back from Anchorage, that was on the table by Mr. Olson. He brought that up. he brought up another attempt to sell C4 or get C4 or have someone get C4 from Mr. Cox. He also tried to get Mr. Cox to buy M16s, but none of this was recorded. I guess that's gratuitous for the government. It is bad for us. This is indeed a surprise because nothing of the sort has ever been described. Nothing of 241. So isn't it amazing that right off the bat you're talking about it? It doesn't surprise me that Mr. Olson would know something about 241. He's a Hell's Angel associate. He's lived his life on the edge in the criminal milieu. He's lived a life of danger, and sometimes he's lived a charming, deceptive, deceitful way of living that is unbelievable. Kim Thessing, at this meeting on February 12th, rejected 241. Coleman Barney on February 12th rejected this 241. Francis Schaefer Cox on February 12th rejected this. The only one who did not was the FBI. They had Olson instigate, reinstigate, and reinstigate a confrontation with, quote, "What do we do if we get captured? What if you get captured?" Quote, "I'm ready to jump in the hot seat. What about 241? What does that get triggered? When does that get triggered? What do you do when they start taking us one by one?" Coleman testified that he thought that sort of language was pushed approximately 31 times. "I'm not going to give credit to J.R. Olson. I'm going to bow my head in shame to the government's manipulation of an informant and an FBI-generated scheme to do what they could do to shut Schaefer up. This was not right. This is not right. And this should not be right. They went after hard-working men, not criminals on your doorstep." I want to back up to February the 4th. Schaefer says he can't go to Anchorage because Marty just had her baby. Stay away from Fulton and his drunk stuff. Everybody believes that Fulton is a licensed dealer. At least he has everyone fooled that he is. Schaefer says bring back as many pineapple grenade bodies. These are legal. He never asked Olson, Vernon, to get C4. C4 comes up later in the conversation because he tells them in macho shop talk how he knows someone who has it. That has morphed into some desire that Schaefer wanted C4. It never happened. Not surprisingly, it comes up on the 6th, which Schaefer denied as far as the encounter with Olson. That was not recorded due to the malfunction. Schaefer discouraged Olson and Vernon from being around Fulton and Bennett at the conference on February the 5th. Instead, he encourages to be around other militia leaders, Norm and Ray. It is the next day on the 6th that Olson reports back to Schaefer and is told about 241, that Fulton wants them to push forward for the fight and tries to get Schaefer to buy the C4. The government is frustrated. To date, 2 informants have not come through with what they want. The February the 12th meeting occurred and Schaefer had said, "I want to do a Gandhi, not a Rambo." He adds, "Let's bluff, pray, and train." Hardly the words of a revolutionary, ladies and gentlemen. But 2 days after that, they say no to such a plan. Olson keeps saying he's ready for it. And what do? What are the logistics? 7 days after the meeting, he does it again. This is the 19th. Schaefer and Vernon part ways on what the militia is about, and Schaefer moves to Coleman's place. Schaefer is delayed from that over and over again about this virtual trucker, Han Solo, who would be ready to pick him up and take him and his family out. He had made arrangements for his bills to be paid, and he is ready to leave. The federal government knew his every move. They collaborate with the state not to arrest him. The only reason they did this is they wanted to try to get him to buy illegal weapons. In the interim, Schaefer has taken a weapons misconduct charge as a means to advocate against the jurisdiction of the Alaska court system. He openly said to Judge Quavar, "There are militia guys who would just as soon kill you in the middle of the night than come and argue by day." The militiamen he's referring to are Fulton and Bennett. But wouldn't it be absolutely ridiculous for him to announce that in court? "Oh, Mr. Fulton and Mr. Bennett they're militia guys, they have their own militias. They're the ones that you got to be worried about, Your Honor." Would you state their names in a public setting? No. It is ironic that the government dispenses with Schaefer's fear, but not Stephen Cooper, who was a U.S. attorney in Fairbanks who mentored and advised and ate lunch with Schaefer. He remembers his last luncheon meeting with Schaefer and that Schaefer was looking behind his shoulder and that he seemed anxious as he joined Steve for lunch. Is that fear? Is that comfort? Is that someone being followed? Cooper's observations were well-founded. Schaefer began to get calls from people in the community. Someone contacted him from GVA, that federal officials had come over there and warned them about the Cox residence as being dangerous. An airport cop stopped him and showed him that his name was on a printout, and they referred to him as on some domestic terrorist watch list, and that some squad was assigned to him. Schaefer interpreted that he was being targeted, but then a clincher, a pastor, not his dad, warned him that some comments were made about him from the FBI who attended that his church. Steve Gibson's message would have caused any reasonable person to be afraid. They have also dispensed with Schaefer's fear when he and Marty went to Trooper Wall's home. Schaefer knew his old address because they grew up across the street from him, but later when Mr. Wall moved, he didn't know the address. Why would you invite someone into your living room and chat if you felt you had to get a reach for your gun in your holster? Schaefer explained that if a writ of assistance is acted upon by the troopers regarding his child's case, then there are militiamen who he could not control, and that they might and what they might do. This statement is made in the clear aftermath with his confrontation with Fulton and Bennett, who want to know what the plan is regarding Schaefer's son. They leave that meeting, they embrace each other. When Trooper Wall was reaching for his gun, was he also thinking in terms with Marty Cox? Did you feel that when Trooper Wall turned to you in the witness stand and talked to you and went at length, and I let him talk, was he embellishing his statements of his fear? Trooper Schoenberg completely exaggerates his fear to Schaefer when he listened to this hearing with Judge Hammer. Schaefer and is instructed he can't serve paperwork on the judge in court nor in his chambers. He listens to that. When they go downstairs near the clerk's office, he's told that he can file the paperwork, and the two of them talk, and there's humor and laughter. But a year later, it is completely different in this courtroom. Again, they hug each other back then, but when Trooper Schoenberg testified, he was so fearful of Schaefer that he altered his weekend plans. Do you believe that Trooper Schoenberg was being truthful to you? Did he write a report of what Mr. Cox had done? Schoenberg's rhetoric, as I said previously, is now always something you want to talk about by the campfire. His political agitation and taking issues right to the homes of those he disagrees with is unique and, yes, unsettling. It too is rude, but that was done in the course of his activism, not with the mindset of a revolutionary. When did any men in the militia get mobilized? Never. The security detail for Francis Schaefer Cox was a well-thought-out plan that actually reduced the risk of someone using machismo and poor judgment. Let's talk about KJNP on November the 23rd, 2010, since this is the basis of the government's charge of conspiracy to commit murder in counts 1 and 12. Count 12 and solicitation to commit a crime of violence in count 16. The government has approached us in two parts. First, when the government collapses and martial law is imposed by whoever is in control, Michael Anderson stated that we would like to fight back if they come to our families, start taking people out of cars at checkpoints, and then we'd have to attack them before they come take our families. In the same breath, he said there was no specific plan. It was just generally, if it comes to that, we would have to identify who was doing it and take them out before they could take us. When would that happen? Can any of you determine when the government's going to collapse, when martial law would be imposed? Moreover, Michael Anderson said you have to identify those who are doing the bidding of martial law. So how do you do that? How do you know when martial law occurs? The government has overreached to link this comment by Michael Anderson to a database that he was keeping but later destroyed. The database is a repository of information on a public website that he can access. Schaefer called for the addresses of Trooper Wall and Barrick. Michael Anderson notes in his notepad with mathematical formulas in one part and names and state employees that are written here and there. They are not a list. The guy is an engineer. I can assure you he is linear enough to write names in a list if he wanted to. This isn't a list. It is best illustrated by his own statement that he got Marshall Johnson's name out of an article he read in the newspaper. He was angry with Officer Marion of the Fairbanks Police Department, so that's how the name got on it. This has been morphed into something that it is not. It is an overreach by the government to say that. Okay, I'm going to stop here on page 101, taking a break on page 101. Day 22. All right, let's pick up with page 101. There's 172 pages total, so we're working our way through this thing slowly but surely. It is an overreach by the government to say that Francis Schaefer Cox, Coleman Barney, and Lonnie Vernon agreed to the unlawful objective, that is, murder of federal officials, when they clearly and reasonably thought out the do's and don'ts with the security detail, aren't they taking the well thought out precautions that they should? If they had not done this, would they be criticized for not taking those precautionary measures? Moreover, you will receive a deadly force instruction that is consistent with the lawful manner that these men discussed with the whiteboard. They agreed to no such thing as murder. They wouldn't have shot anyone, even if little green men dropped out of the sky. Count 16 of solicitation of Lonnie Vernon and Coleman Barney to commit of Francis Schaeffer Cox to solicit Lonnie Vernon and Coleman Barney to commit murder is not present in any sense. Those gentlemen came together as a militia to protect each other. It is not a militia whose veiled not a militia whose veiled purpose is to be an instrumentality of death against federal employees. Coleman Barney and Lonnie Vernon were never told to murder on Schaeffer's behalf. They were to defend and use deadly force only when someone uses it against them without rhyme or reason. The government has also represented in count 1 that between August 2009 and March 10th of 2011, that Francis Schaeffer Cox, Coleman Barney, and Lonnie Vernon conspired to possess unregistered silencers and destructive devices as described in count 1. There was no specific agreement to possess, quote, unregistered silencers, unquote, and destructive devices, hornet's nests with launchers. Each device is commercially available and is considered by ATF to be illegal if combined. There was no agreement among these three men to have an unlawful objective of possessing a combined unregistered launcher and hornet's nest. ATF says you combine those, you have a destructive device. Count 2 and count 3. Michael Anderson Schaeffer and Philip Clark went to ATF to have a declaration signed. ATF agent discussed his views on firearms. Schaeffer mistakenly believed that homemade firearms were outside of the purview of registration. He's wrong. He was mistaken. Count 4, the government, in this case, relies on a machine gun that it says is automatic. I hope you remember that testimony very clearly. The video you saw was not of the machine gun found in the trailer. Schaeffer made the machine gun over a period of years, starting at age 16, but it did not fire. The government looked at the magazine well and saw the serial number and made an assumption as to the rest of the characteristics and component of that machine gun. Remember, he first testified that there was no trace of powder, the expert did, which the gun was never fired. He later on redirect says it could have been cleaned and not left an indication that it was fired. Do you believe that is true? A machine gun is any weapon which shoots, is designed to shoot, or can be readily restored to shoot automatically, more than one shot without a manual reloading by a single function of the trigger. The World War II model manual shows one how to design it to shoot, but that doesn't mean it worked as a machine gun, and it didn't. Count 6 also refers to a homemade silencer. Again, he used this to shoot at foxes who were raiding his chicken coop. He's no evidence that Mr. Cox went anywhere with the silencer. Again, he operated on the mistaken belief that he could possess a homemade silencer. Count 7 refers to March the 10th as it was a conspiracy. Schaeffer thought at all times he was dealing with a licensed dealer, and he did not consummate any deal. He put gloves on because they might go back to Fulton. He may have expressed an interest and curiosity, but he didn't get the 9mm silencers, and he didn't want live grenades. Fulton supposedly was bringing up 25 grenades, but they were grenade bodies, not grenades. Besides, they never ironed out details on March 1st, and jokes were exchanged, but nothing was ever hammered out. Olson was trying to get Schaeffer to buy them. On March the 10th, the first words out of Schaeffer's mouth when they get into Olson's vehicle is, "Hey, what's up now?" And later asked, "Is that the trucker?" He did not have possession, certainly not by definition, which means he had the power and intention to control these items. He did not. Why would he wear gloves if that was the case? In fact, Mr. Olson made it very clear, he pointed out, there's Han Solo, he's taking a nap. Nothing was ever consummated. Schaeffer carried a firearm most of the time, but he was not agreeing to anything with anyone at that time. Just because he had a gun did not mean he automatically committed a crime of violence, since there was no conspiracy to possess unregistered silencers and live grenades. Touching them is not power and intention to control it. The government makes an assumption that Francis Schaeffer Cox combined the hornet's nest with the launcher and that he was packed to leave. They have no evidence that these two items, while legally commercially available, were ever in the hands of Francis Schaefer Cox. Never. They have never seen him with it. They have no proof that he ever combined these two items. To sum up, I guess I want to ask you this. Would we be here today if Schaefer never spoke a peep? That is, if the solution speech never came to be, the answer is no. They concentrated a huge effort to go after someone who spoke his mind. I asked you in my opening to remember this refrain. It is dangerous to be right when the government is wrong. Schaefer spoke his ideas, about a renewed effort by all of us to look at what the founders of our country really wanted. Is that wrong? That visit on our roots has generated him as a target of government, and not the other way around. I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, for verdicts of not guilty, and thank you. The dishonorable court, deaf and dumb judge. Thank you, Mr. Traverso. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take 10 minutes before the next argument from Mr. Dooley. You may be excused. And Mr. Maher and any other members of the press, if you wait till the defendants go for their break, I'll come back out here and we'll talk about your notice issue. The dishonorable court, the clerk, all rise. The matter stands in brief recess. Court recessed at 2:17 p.m. until 2:29 p.m. Jury not present. The clerk, all rise. His dishonorable deaf and dumb judge, the court, this United States dishonorable court is again in session. Please be seated. Are you ready? Yes, sir. The court, okay, bring the jury in. What time did we break, Denali? Do you know? We broke at 2:17. Jury present at 2:30 p.m. Dooley, Madam Clerk, can you hear my voice? I can, thank you. The dishonorable court, okay, please give your attention now to Mr. Dooley, who may offer argument for Mr. Barney. Closing argument of Defendant Barney by Mr. Dooley. I've often thought in this case that if we simply stuck to the charges which these fellows are charged, it would have been over in a week. We've had a 5-week trial. In the first week we were here, we saw a lot of guns flowing in and bullets flowing in. And I think in the first week, every single one of them was legal. They were there, I think, to frighten people. But it's as though it's a case presented by Californians to other Californians. I don't think that will frighten somebody. There was something that was said in opening by the government. I hope I get through this. That none of these defendants had any firearms or destructive devices registered to them. I perked up, but I hope people have learned since then that you have to buy a handgun, a rifle, or a shotgun at Fred Meyer or Pay and Save or any place else. You don't get it. You don't get it registered on the National Firearms Registry. Think the NRA actually misleads people about that? You fill out a form at a dealer, give it to the dealer sends it nowhere, he keeps it for 20 years, and then if you're out of business, he passes it on to the local ATF where it mildews in a box someplace. But it isn't registered at a national level. So that was true but misleading. I want to remind you, it terrifies me. The allegations in the instructions are allegations of the government. We don't agree with them. The court didn't issue those. It's simply presenting what the government is alleging. They haven't been proven unless you say they're proven. This is a largely conspiracy case. A magic problem that you have to deal with is that there is no conspiracy if it's one person with J.R. Olson or one person with Bill Fulton. Those are government informants, and the law says that is not a conspiracy. I think that applies to the issue of purchasing silencers. My recollection is that Vernon, may have said to someone, hey, they're selling silencers, this Class 3 dealer and this fellow J.R. Olson. A conspiracy has to be an agreement to do something unlawful. No agreement there. And then the transactions were done by Coleman Barney with government informant J.R. Olson and by Cox with government informant J.R. Olson, by Vernon with government informant J.R. Olson. By law, that is not a conspiracy. Now I'd like to move on to the witness you heard, kinds of witnesses. You heard about Bill Fulton, quite a bit about him. A lot of people perceived him as a violent fellow. He testified as to his reasoning for being violent at North Tactical. And you may remember Mike Anderson and several other people talking about his outburst to Les Zerbe and to the others. This is a man who's hoping to continue doing confidential informant work for the government agencies elsewhere. J.R. Olson, I think anybody in this courtroom would agree that it better be on tape because you can't trust him. He has misled so many people, and let me start over. J.R. Olson, he has misled so many people in his life and cheated them out of their money, and you know what? They all trusted him at first. That's a significant thing, because a con man like that can take the stand and make people believe him? Why would the government hire such a person? And they continue to support him. This eight hand grenade we've just learned, you don't have to really worry about it. That the 8 hand grenades found in the Bradway shed, that has been in the case for 15 months. He didn't find any 8 hand grenades in the Bradway shed or anywhere else, and yet they're still sponsoring his testimony about that. And he's paid a lot of money. This is a guy who does a lot of things for money that he can get. He doesn't pay his taxes. He doesn't pay back the people. He cheated. You know, in a personal injury plaintiff's lawyer were to present his traffic accident victim to a jury using somebody like J.R. Olson, they get a 0 from the jury. Mike Anderson, as you know, was in the Fairbanks Correctional Center in jail. For a number of months, the first month, he was in solitary confinement. You heard that he attempted to commit suicide? He was so distressed with a sharpened part of his glasses, thought better of it and stopped. But that shows you the amount of stress that he was suffering in there. Then he's finally released. Thank you, God, I'm out. But a few months later, federal agents show up, a number of them, and say, you're going to jail as a witness and a material witness, and they almost certainly had chats with him. I suggest that if something that Mike Anderson said is very important to the government, you should consider Mike Anderson to be basically the grizzly bear who insisted he was a rabbit, and I'll explain that. An old joke about the LA Police Department, they tend to be kind of rough with people. And the joke is that the CIA and the FBI and the LAPD were tasked with finding rabbits in Central Park. The CIA went in and said, we're pretty sure we can hear some rabbits, but we need a lot more funding so we can do stuff. The FBI went in. You remember J. Edgar Hoover didn't believe there was a mafia in the country? FBI went in and said, there's no rabbits in Central Park. The LAPD went in and they came out dragging a grizzly bear, beaten to a pulp. And the grizzly bear is saying, I'm a rabbit, I'm a rabbit. I think Mike Anderson is in the position of that poor grizzly bear. There are charges here. They're scattered around. On the hornet's nest with the launcher, one of the elements is the defendant had to know it was a 37mm launcher and that it was loaded with a hornet's nest, anti-personnel round. But another one is the defendant had to knowingly possess a destructive device. What's that? How do you know that you're possessing a destructive device? When the irony is you're holding a lethal weapon and on it is a device that fires rubber bullets. Everybody ought to have a rubber bullet thing. We'd end up with more live burglars. I guess would be the disadvantage. And I don't think there's evidence to show that these men knew a hornet's nest and a launcher amounted to a destructive device. Another thing, we got these hornet's nests, 4 of them in the trailer, 2 launchers in the trailer, but the hornet's nests aren't in the launchers. Why is that illegal? We got people selling hornet's nests in the same store where they sell launchers and nobody's locking them up. Why is it that the 4 hornet's nests in the trailer, not inside the launchers, would be illegal? The hand grenades. People are going to have to check their garages after this trial. The hand grenades with the holes in them, the paperweight things, were in there. 4 of them had fuses. One of the fuses didn't work at the ATF testing. And they're coming up with this smokeless powder and JB Weld that was in the toolbox. The trailer is what, 6 feet wide? Everything in there is in a close proximity. Okay, I'm pausing here on page 111. 111 of day 22, taking a break. All right, let's pick back up with page 111. Why? Everything in there is in close proximity. Why is that an indication that he was planning to make anybody, Coleman or Mr. Cox, was planning to make hand grenades out of that stuff? Why would you use JB Weld? Why not use something really good, like tap and die set, and put some threads in? There's no evidence they had ever made any hand grenades before this. These are things that Cox thought were important to him. And we all have these, and we have all these ATF experts come in, and we've seen the films. They didn't use the powder that was in the trailer to do the testing. They didn't use the JB Weld that was in the trailer to do the testing. They went out and bought brand new powder and had never been opened and never had any seal broken. They themselves testified that the powder in the trailer was old, it was only partially full, and obviously the seal had been broken. And it was in Fairbanks, in the land of a million below zero and other wild temperature and atmospheric changes. So what they proved was that if you got a bunch of ATF experts on explosives, after a couple of hours they can create an explosive device with the right stuff they bought. All right, I sure hope they could. Your homes are filled, everyone's homes are filled with various destructive devices. If the government wants to argue that, you've got bleach and ammonia. You've got brake fluid out in your car and glycerin in the wife's bathroom. That's an explosive. There are numerous explosives sitting in your house, but you'd better get some storage cabinets outside of your house. Now remember that the law on these hand grenades that were in the trailer is that they had to be readily assembled. I didn't even see the ATF do that. The experts wanted to follow up on something on the freedom of speech concept. Even the provocative use of speech advocating the use of force is legal. And we've had some presidents who say some remarkable things. Thomas Jefferson, the tree of liberty must be fertilized. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Maybe not as harsh as Mr. Cox. The spirit of resistance to government is so valuable on certain occasions that I wish it to be always kept alive. President Jefferson. And he loved to quote a philosopher named Denis Diderot. Man will never be free until the last king is strangled with the entrails of the last priest. Those are the remarkable statements for our president to make. The other problem with these hand grenades, as well as the hornet's nest and launcher, even with the hand grenades, the defendant had to knowingly possess a destructive device. This is an element of the offense. I have heard no proof from the government that these men knowingly possessed a destructive device. Sure, they knew what they had, but was it a destructive device? Now this is something that frankly was shocking, and you folks may not have known what occurred in this courtroom, and this has to do with the possession of a material in the trailer. They're claiming that Coleman Barney possessed it, that he controlled it. Doesn't count that he can drive a trailer around. The things that are illegal, did he control those? And what you may not have realized you witnessed was Schaefer Cox, an irritating guy. You just want to slap him around. He testified he'd never been punched in the nose, and he needed that several times. But what he did is he took the stand under oath. On direct exam, he said, "Those items are mine, they're not Coleman's." I couldn't quite believe my ears. So on cross, I asked him, "Are they yours or Coleman's?" "They're mine." "The J.B. Weld, is that yours or Coleman's?" "That is mine." He was taking ownership of the material in there, knowing the amazing risk he was facing. There are all kinds of outs he could have tried, but we've all had the honor of seeing an honorable man take the stand. You may want to punch him in the nose, but you cannot call him a dishonorable person. Now, we've heard a lot of things about this 241 stuff. It is not charged as a crime. It's one of the 4 weeks of trial out of the 5 weeks that doesn't pertain to these weapons charges and murder charges. May have been hateful to hear it, but there was nothing illegal about it, and in fact, all three of the non-government guys said no. Whatever the reason was for saying no, they said no. It was only the government informant who agreed to it. That's another point. These government witnesses, informants, and law enforcement officers are human beings. They have the same range of integrity, honor, honesty, capability as the ordinary range of people, and you should treat them the same as the person sitting next to you. You cannot give them an extra 10% because they got a uniform and a badge. That doesn't work. And you're not a cheerleader for the police. In your role here, you took an oath that you would judge this case fairly, accurately, neutrally, and objectively. Another thing to remember about the government witnesses is that there are advocates for their position. You may not have realized that. But the excellent Mr. Rick Sutherland here is not sitting at our table. He's sitting at the U.S. table. And all of those fellows are working to make a case. Getting ahead of myself. On these, knowing it's a destructive device, how does a person know that? My daughter came up with some, we live in this age of sort of security guards everywhere. Put your arms up, step back, turn around, an age of warnings. We have a warning on everything. Styrofoam cups say coffee is hot. We have a curling iron that she found, my daughter. Do not use internally. Hair dryer, do not operate while sleeping. Knife blade may be sharp. And yet somebody goes into a store and is supposed to know that the hornet's nest and launchers are destructive devices. One of the things that comes up here is there's 2 counts against Coleman Barney at least, and I think the other fellows of carrying a firearm during and in relation to a crime of violence. But carrying it isn't enough. It has instruction 41, facilitate or play a role in a crime. I didn't see them facilitating or playing a role in anything, especially on the March 10th takedown. One of the things that you're going to have to do is find that each element of these offenses has been proven by the government beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the highest standard in the legal community in English-speaking nations. You have reasonable suspicion way down here. Is it more probable than not right about in the middle, about 51%, 49%. Then there's a standard called clear and convincing evidence. These folks have to say it is beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, how do you apply that? It'll surprise you, but you folks are the Supreme Court of the facts. When people appeal, they appeal because the judge misled us by lawyers, misled by us, lawyers made a mistake. So let me suggest that you have a decision to make, and in this case, in terms of the facts, it's irreversible. Would you, relying on J.R. Olson and some of these other thoughts, in order to turn off the life support of someone you love? Because it's almost as important here. Another instruction says the burden of proof is on the government, and that just sounds like the sort of nonsense that we hear all the time. And I really didn't know what it meant. I've gotten old enough to know where other lawyers will hire me to be an arbitrator in arbitration. That's kind of like a judge in a trial, but not as fancy. And occasionally I'll have multiple parties, and there might be a contract or a crane fell over or something, and I can't make up my mind about something. I can't decide whether I have a clear and convincing evidence or probably both. More probable than not. So I just check and I see who is it. Which of these parties has a burden of proof on the issue, and if I can't make up my mind, I rule against him. It's that easy. You got a tool to make a decision. Well, in this case, every single element of the offenses, the burden of proof is on the government. And the burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. There is no burden of any kind on the defendants. The burden is so great that the prosecution is allowed to go last and we don't get to be heard from again. First off, I'll talk about the TSA list. KJNP. First off, I'll talk about the TSA list. Coleman Barney doesn't know anything about that stuff. However, they tried to link him to it, and the evidence of that comes from Mike Anderson. Now let's go to KJNP. Now, what they should have done is hire a security detail from a private company to go to KJNP. That private company probably wouldn't have been arrested. Another thing to keep in mind is the whole word killing is a terrible word, but killing and the word homicide are not always illegal. Homicide, for example, if you commit suicide, homicide is the killing of a human being. If you commit suicide, you just committed homicide. If a police officer shoots someone in defense of the storekeeper, he has committed a justifiable homicide. When Texas executes somebody, Texas has committed homicide, but it's a legal homicide. And one of the legal homicides that we are entitled to in this country is that we can shoot back to prevent ourselves from being killed. We have the right of self-defense. In Nazi Germany, there was no right of self-defense against the government. And they routinely walked into houses and shot people. And those people had no right to shoot back. Now, federal agents are important people. But if federal agents show up and start shooting without properly announcing themselves and a bunch of other steps, you don't have to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, kill me." You can shoot back. Killing in self-defense in Instruction 48 is not unlawful. That's the plan they had. And frankly, I think the government was offended at the notion that you could shoot back in self-defense if it's a federal official. Wait a minute, they're federal officials. You can't do that, but you can. If they're killing, yeah. And did that have the wrongful understanding that might happen? You can read the papers. You've got the biker guys coming in with the leather jackets. The homeowner shoots at them. They then turn out to be DEA guys. Now, Schaefer Cox had many facets to his life that Coleman Barney did not know. All of these little clubs and ideas that Schaefer Cox had, Coleman Barney was not privy to them. Many of these things he learned in jail when he was given 2 terabytes worth of discovery to look at for the last 15 months. One of the things that frankly was outrageous in the prosecutor's closing comments was that you will never hear any evidence on the tapes of Schaefer Cox talking about Bill Fulton and Aaron Bennett. And you won't because it's hearsay. And we know happens to the hearsay. It does not come in. Now, I think the defendants have tried to do their best to present an honorable case and to testify honorably, and that's an important thing. They have a duty there. The government has a duty to do justice, not to present the 8 hand grenades with J.R. Olson. And duty is something that doesn't just apply to the top dogs. It applies to all of us ordinary people. There was a battle called the Battle of Trafalgar. It's something happened there that led the British for the first time into democracy, the first steps. And it was because there was real danger that the English fleet would be sunk by the French and Spanish. And before this battle, English vessels would send up signals on the flag, and they'd drum up the officers from wherever they were to the decks, and they'd be ordered to face the flagship, and they'd raise up on those signals. The king expects every officer to do his duty, but at Trafalgar, Lord Nelson set up a different flag. He drummed up everybody onto the deck. The lowest 9-year-old powder monkey in the lowest hold came up on the deck, and they all faced the flag, and he sent up a new signal. England, not the king, England expects every man, not the officers, every man to do his duty. And there was a huge cheer. For once, people recognized the value of the 9-year-old powder monkey. We all have the duties that we must do. I suggest the government has done its duty properly. I have been proud to represent Coleman Barney. Thank you. The dishonorable deaf and dumb blind judge, the dishonorable deaf and dumb judge. Thank you, Mr. Dooley. Miss Hayden, I guess you can get yourself wired up here. Miss Hayden, yes, sir. The dishonorable court. Yeah, you can stand up and take a stretch while we get organized here if you want, folks. And Your Honor, I don't know if you can see this. The court, that's all right, that's all right. The dishonorable court. Okay, please give your attention now to Miss Hayden for Mr. Barney. I'm sorry, for Mr. Vernon, excuse me. Closing argument of Defendant Vernon by Miss Hayden. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Your Honor, the government, indiscernible. I get the honor of going third, so I hope I won't bore you with some stuff that you've already heard. I represent Mr. Vernon, and so when I gave my opening statements, I told you that you would not hear Lonnie Vernon's name very often. The clerk. I'm sorry, I can't hear you now. You covered up your microphone somehow. Pardon me? You covered up your microphone somehow. I couldn't hear you when you did that. Oh, sorry. Is that better? Yes, thank you. Okay, I told you that you wouldn't hear Lonnie Vernon's name very often, and I think that's true. And I'd like to start off by going back to the beginning when this case first originated and take you through where you'll hear Lonnie Vernon's name and where you won't. Because basically this is a case about not what the evidence shows, but what the evidence doesn't show. And so we start off with two organizations, the Sons of Gad and the Sons of Issachar. And I think you'll recall that Mr. Clark came in and he talked about these two organizations. And those two organizations were developed to assist Francis Schaeffer Cox by counseling him. And Mr. Clark, businessman, was involved in his community, was involved in the Second Amendment Task Force, as with Mr. Hume, who was an ex-state trooper. And there came a time, well, first of all, Mr. Vernon was not involved in either of those organizations, and there's no evidence that he participated in those organizations. Around about January of 2010, there was a training out at Mr. Clark's property. I think you'll remember him talking about it. Mr. Vernon was there, Mr. Brockman was there, of course Mr. Clark was there, Francis Schaeffer Cox was there, I believe Mr. Zerby was there, I think Ken Thessing was there. I may or may not be right about that, but you remember Mr. Clark testifying? It was in January, it was cold, even the young guys were kind of out of shape, but definitely Mr. Vernon had bad knees, bad back. They were really struggling to get through that training. And if you recall, Mr. Clark testified about they had some tannerite out there. That's the ammonium nitrate that's in little plastic jars that's used for target practice. And I think he testified that, yeah, he had brought that to the training and he didn't get to shoot it, but others did. And that's because you use it for long distance target practice so that you don't have to, if you're shooting a paper target, you have to walk out there and see if you hit it or not. If you hit tannerite, it kind of makes a flash, a boom. Perfectly legal, and he testified about that. Then following this training, which was not really militia training, because the militia had not been formed yet, following it, Mr. Clark, Mr. Zerby, Francis Schaeffer Cox, and some others had a meeting as to whether the Sons of Gad and the Sons of Issachar should transform or develop this militia. And I think you will recall that you saw an email or a printout, and it had a bunch of writing on it. And they all took a vote as to whether there should be a militia and to whether they wanted to participate in it. And then Francis Schaeffer Cox, the only person that said, yeah, I thought we ought to have this militia, was Les Zerby. And Mr. Clark was kind of upset because Francis Schaeffer Cox wanted to be the commander of the militia and he wanted to do it without a vote. In other words, he just appointed himself. And that's when Mr. Clark said, well, you know, no, I don't think I want to be involved in this anymore. I don't think this is going the way I thought it was going to go. I thought there were a group of Christian men who were going to get together. We have some like goals. We're concerned about the same things. We're concerned about the economy. We're concerned about the government. but I don't want somebody coming in and saying, okay, they were my commander, and I can't remember now what rank he had. I know that in the end, he ended up down to private. You remember him testifying about that? And even though these guys had taken this vote, and they had said, well, no, we don't really want to be involved in a militia. We don't want to have this command. Francis Schaeffer Cox sent out an email. And Mr. Johnson, if I could have 53602, bear with us. If you remember this, it may be a little hard for you to read, but you'll have it back in the jury room with you. But even though all these men had said, no, we don't want to be involved in a militia, Francis Schaeffer Cox sent out this email telling them that he thought their jobs ought to be in the militia. He completely ignored them, and that's the kind of where we are in the center of this case. As I told you in the beginning, this case is mainly about Francis Schaeffer Cox and his inability to distinguish between reality and his own fiction. Now, I'm not one to use a lot of cliches, and I don't think they go over well with a jury, and I've thought and thought and thought. And I've been thinking for, well, the past probably 15 months on how to say this in a better way, and it just came up. I just can't come up with a better way than to say that Francis Schaeffer Cox was a legend in his own mind. He started out with good ideas. Obviously, people in Fairbanks were very impressed with him. He was an eloquent speaker. He's charismatic. He draws people to him. I mean, he almost won the first office that he ran for. But then after that, something happened. I don't know what it is. But something happened, and his personal goals or his personal problems became more important than the movement that he was working for. It became more about him than the goals of the militia, of this militia, and he wanted to have for the community. And I know he talked some in a jury selection about the term militia, and you know is a negative term. Is it something that can be helpful for the community? And we're not here to decide that. Certainly I believe that in the beginning they had some good goals. Wanted to work for the community, Christian men concerned about their family, concerned about law and order. Somewhere that got confused with the goals, the personal goals of Francis Schaeffer Cox. So we have this militia training, or this training prior to the militia being formed back in January. And Mr. Vernon was there and he participated. And as I've told you, it was difficult for him in the middle of winter. He's an older guy, and after that, we don't hear a lot about Mr. Vernon. We don't hear a lot about what Mr. Vernon was doing. We know he's a truck driver, probably working at home with his wife, but we hear about Francis Schaeffer Cox's problems. He's charged with domestic assault in state court, misdemeanor, pleads guilty, and then he's got problems with OCS. OCS, just following the regular protocol, wants to make sure that everything is okay with his family, with his son, but he's got issues with that. He's involved in a lot of different organizations. The Second Amendment Task Force, which we heard a lot from people in Fairbanks, supported the Second Amendment Task Force. Were a lot of people up there that thought, yeah, this is a good idea. They sent around a petition. A lot of people signed it. He's also involved in the Alaska Assembly Post. It's a little out there, sovereign citizen movement, but nothing illegal, perfectly fine. If that's people's beliefs, and they've got a right to voice that. And he was involved in this organization called the Liberty Bell. And while he was responding to a call for the Liberty Bell, he was charged with, again, a Class B misdemeanor. Possession of a concealed weapon without telling a police officer. And this is when his goals started to change and become more about him than promoting the beliefs or the ideas that he had been speaking about. So following those two incidents at some point, and I believe Ron Wall, trooper from Fairbanks, testified, I think he said it was Mother's Day, which would have been in May, and the Francis Schaeffer Cox came to his house. And how did he know where he lived? I believe the evidence will show that Michael Anderson gave him that address. And that was disturbing to Mr. Wall. And while Francis Schaeffer Cox was there, Ron Wall believes that he was threatening him in a subtle way. Now, was Lonnie Vernon there? No. Did Lonnie Vernon know that Francis Cox was going to go to Ron Wall's house? No. When Francis Schaeffer Cox spoke to Ron Wall and said, hey, I don't know what my militia guys will do here. You know, if y'all come and try to talk to my kid or take my kid away or whatever, again, just like in the exhibit that we saw where he ignored what these other people had told him about forming the militia. He was speaking on behalf of people without their knowledge and without their authority. Lonnie Vernon probably didn't even know until this case that he had been out to Ron Wall's house, much less that he was speaking on behalf of him as a militia member. Then we have some other visits that Francis Schaeffer Cox did that Lonnie Vernon probably never knew about. The visit on Fort Wainwright, the visit where he's taken the Second Amendment petition to Assistant U.S. Attorney Mr. Cooper, the FBI, the ATF, the troopers, probably whoever else would let him in their office. Mr. Vernon's not there. Mr. Vernon doesn't know that this is happening, yet Francis Schaeffer Cox is making representations without his authority and without his knowledge. And during this time period, Francis Schaeffer Cox is contacting members of TSA and Homeland Security. We heard them testify about him coming up to them in the airport. I believe it's Don Baptist, the dog handler, or Miss Curtis in Walmart, people that Mr. Vernon has no idea that he's talking to. Mr. Vernon wasn't there, and he's doing these things as a representative of the militia, yet nobody in the militia is supporting this. And during this time period, He's also talking with Michael Anderson. Hey, I've got a problem with Malik Jones. Why don't you get me his address? I've got a problem with Ron Wall. I've got a problem with, I can't remember what his first name is, but Barack. I've got a problem with Wendy Williams. I've got a problem with Trina Bootcamp. None of the members of the militia knew that he was doing this. He didn't discuss this with them. This was all about him. So then we've heard a lot of evidence about this fundraiser at Blondie's or Far North Tactical. The meeting at Pikes prior to the fundraiser and the grand jury de jure and all of that kind of stuff. And y'all have probably heard more about than you want to know. But was Mr. Vernon there? No, he wasn't there. He wasn't at Pikes. He wasn't at Blondie's. He was not a member of the grand jury de jure. And remember, when Aaron Bennett testified, he was worried about what was going to happen. He told you that I called all of Stafer Cox's trusted friends to come and to talk to him that night. Well, that wasn't Lonnie Vernon. He wasn't one of Mr. Cox's trusted friends. He wasn't there. He didn't know anything about it. So from January, they're out at Clark's and they're training. We hear nothing about Lonnie Vernon's until the August barbecue, and he was there at the August barbecue. That was the barbecue that Mr. Barney had. And you remember they're trying to recruit members because, all right, they've only got less than 10 maybe, and at the same time Francis Schaeffer Cox is representing to the rest of the world that they have 3,500 members ready to go. They've got airplanes, they've got boats, they've got doctors, they've got hospitals, they've got their own world. But that wasn't true. He was speaking on behalf of other people. They didn't authorize it, and they didn't know about it. So from the August barbecue, where they picked up a couple of more members, the next topic would be the meetings for KJ&P. And that's kind of the heart of Count 12, part of the heart of this case. And heard a lot about the whiteboard. Little hard to read, but we'll try to make our way through it. But in addition to the whiteboard, Mr. Johnson, if you can give me 446 and 15303 side by side, please. Page 10 on 446 and 15303. Let's just talk a little bit about the plans for KJ&P. We know that KJ&P was to happen in November 23rd. And on that morning, Schaeffer Francis Cox was scheduled to have a court appearance in the state court. And then that evening, he was going to go to KJ&P to do a television interview. And we know from the testimony of J.R. Olson that there were several meetings about this day. And we know from the testimony of J.R. Olson that he went to a meeting that happened on November the 19th. Mr. Vernon wasn't there. Mr. Barney wasn't there. The names of the people that came to the meeting were names associated with the Alaska Assembly Post. As you remember, the Alaska Assembly Post wanted to use this court appearance to, lack of a better term, spring-load their agenda as to whether the Alaska court system was legitimate or not. And it's at that meeting where JR is attending that it's recorded. Mr. Vernon's not there. Mr. Barney's not there. And it's at the meeting that the government is giving you the quote, let me make sure I get it straight here, about stomping them in the eyes. There's no mention of that at the second meeting where Mr. Vernon is at and where Mr. Barney is at. And at the first meeting, Francis Schaeffer Cox is saying we need to get as many people as we can out for this. This is going to be really, really important. We need to get a lot of people. Well, how many did they get? Ken Thessing, Mr. Vernon, Mr. Barney, Gary Brockman, a guy named Mike that was on the four-wheeler. So for this very, very, very important event, 5 people. Now the issue here is, as charged in the indictment, whether there was a conspiracy to murder federal officials. There's going to be fictitious FBI agents that Francis Schaeffer Cox thought were after him. Now you've been charged by the jury as to what a conspiracy is. And a conspiracy is an agreement to do something unlawful. It is not enough that individuals simply meet and discuss matters or acted in similar ways to helped one another. There has to be a plan, an agreed upon plan. And so with these exhibits on the left-hand side, there is a piece of paper that was found in Mr. Vernon's home. We don't have any testimony, but probably written perhaps by his wife, I don't know. And it sets forth the agenda for that day. Security thing, what they're going to do at the courthouse. And on the right-hand side, we have a piece of paper that came out of Schaeffer Francis Cox's home referencing the same event. And then we have the whiteboard. I believe Mr. Barney testified that the whiteboard that's all of his recollections written by Ken Thessing. But during a meeting at Francis Schaeffer Cox's home in his living room, where Gary Brockman attended and Mr. Vernon was, where Coleman Barney was. Now the first part of each of these lists talk about the courthouse until you get down, let's just say on the whiteboard. Make sure I got enough tail here. Pretty much down to here where it says go to the safe houses. And then it starts talking about KJ&P. Up here it talks about the equipment. It talks about rifle, pistol, OCS grenades, radio armor. This one was presented at the meeting, talks about non-lethal first option. And then it talks about hornet's nest and OCS gases. And then down here as a last resort, second option, lead poisoning. Now Mr. Johnson, if you could pull up there starting where it says evening. This is the document from Mr. Vernon's home. Evening, 2 vehicles, scope out KJ&P. Once there, stop all incoming traffic. We've heard about that. We've heard, can't remember her last name, but her first name was Vicky. And she wasn't very happy. She was stopped. Watch all the entrances. If troopers show up, let them arrest. If they bear down on anyone, use discretion. Agents try not to kill. Bodily stop. Use grenades to stop. That's not the same as what's on this whiteboard. It doesn't say lead poisoning. It says bodily stop. If you remember the testimony of Gary Brockman, he said, well, yeah, if agents showed up, we're supposed to try to keep them in their vehicle. We were supposed to use our bodies to stop them. If you remember, he didn't recall seeing the whiteboard. His testimony was he was sitting in Francis Schaeffer Cox's living room, and you've seen pictures of it. It's not very big, with several other people. He didn't recall seeing that. We're sitting there having coffee, eating cake, ice cream. There's no evidence that Mr. Vernon saw this. That document was found in his home, but remember, there has to be an agreement. He has to agree as to what this plan is. Simply having a document, even though it's different from than the whiteboard, doesn't necessarily mean that he agreed to what's on the document, even. I mean, we've all gone to different meetings, maybe a city council, I don't know if they still have PTA or not, but just different meetings in our community, perhaps political meetings, maybe even sat down with somebody that was giving a religious advice. And we may make notes, and we may keep those notes in our home because we're interested in what's being said, but simply because we have the notes doesn't mean that we agree. Now let's look at the document that came out of Francis Schaeffer Cox's home and Mr. Johnson. If we could just highlight the first area there, the prep, rifle, pistol, armor. That's pretty much the same. OC or CS grenade. We know those are little canisters. Phone and radio. What's missing? Hornet's nest. Not on there. If you could back out, and let's start there about 4 from the bottom. Here it is again. Go to KGNP. Watch all entrances. Pretty much the same. Local kill not okay. Agents only if life is in danger. That's a little more than if they show up and draw down. You got to kill them. That's not what that says. So you've got these 3 variations from 3 different sources. There was no agreement, there was no plan, thus there is no conspiracy. Going in chronological order, we go to Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving, and again, I don't remember whose home it was in. I believe it was in Francis Schaeffer Cox's home. But his mother-in-law testified about it, having Thanksgiving with he and his wife. And he starts talking about TSA and his dislike of TSA. Lonnie Vernon wasn't there. There's no evidence that Francis Schaeffer Cox was ever shared or dislike of TSA or Homeland Security with Lonnie Vernon. Following Thanksgiving, we go to some of the state court appearances. The first one being in front of Judge Quavar, and we heard a lot of testimony about that, where Francis Schaeffer Cox got up and made a comment to the judge. I can't remember the exact words, but something to the effect of, we'd just as soon, kill you as listen to you, and attribute it to everybody who was in there in the gallery. Again, Francis Schaeffer Cox saying something that is not authorized and that people don't know what he's going to do, and attributing it to them. Now, Lonnie Vernon was at that court appearance. He was there, Mr. Barney was there, and Mr. Barney testified that he was shocked by the comment. And he testified that Mr. Vernon was shocked by that comment. Didn't know that Francis Schaeffer Cox was going to say that, and basically didn't like it. It didn't represent their views. Now, the next court appearance, I believe it was on the 15th, and I don't believe there's any evidence that Lonnie Vernon was present at that one. I could be mistaken, but I don't believe there's been any evidence. That there's the one here, again, Francis Schaeffer Cox representing all these individuals without their authority and without their knowledge, tells Officer Schoenberg that he's got them outgunned and outmanned. So we've kind of gotten to the end of the year there, and in January we heard J.R. Olson testify that he is participating with Mr. Cox in a number of conference calls for the Alaska Assembly Post. And he's going to Mr. Cox's house to participate in these conference calls. But Lonnie Vernon is not present for any of those conference calls. And we heard a lot of testimony about the Alaska Assembly Post. It's an organization that promotes sovereign citizens. And we know a lot of the people who belong to the Alaska Assembly Post have, what do you call it, an embossing on their driver's license. We saw Mr. Cox's driver's license, and they take it, they run it kind of through something like a credit card machine, and they believe that the court system doesn't apply to them. But what do we know about Mr. Vernon? You'll have this, okay to open, I assume. You'll have this back in the jury room with you. It's an exhibit. It's Mr. Vernon's driver's license. In fact, it's a CDL, commercial driver's license, no embossing. Came out of his wallet at the time he was arrested. And he's got a passport card. That sounds like somebody that doesn't think the government applies to them. We've heard about people, just bear with me a minute while I go through here. You'll see all of these things. Here's a document certifying with a CDL that he's undergone federal drug testing. But that's you have to do when you have a CDL, complying with the government, indiscernible. Heard a lot about people and their Social Security cards, their Social Security number, renouncing their Social Security number. Here's Lonnie Vernon's Social Security card. I don't think I'd be able to say I even have mine in my wallet, but he does. And Also, what we know, Lonnie Vernon had a civil tax case, and I think it was a Special Agent Sutherland testified that he was concerned about it. He was going through the court system. He was complying with the court system. He was trying to make his deadlines. He wasn't doing the things that Francis Schaeffer Cox was doing as far as saying, no jurisdiction over me, I'm not going to show up. In fact, I'm going to sue them for a couple $1 million, and I'm going to file these tax liens, and I'm going to file these tax civil suits. Craziness. He's not doing that. So in the middle of January, we have Francis Schaeffer Cox's trial at Denny's, trying him for his domestic violence case that he's already pled guilty to, been sentenced, and his weapons misconduct. And there were a fair number of people there. You've seen the list. They all signed in, Lonnie Vernon and his wife, and they were there in the beginning, and then they left. They didn't stick around for the verdict. They left. So the next topic, trying to go in chronological order so I don't miss anything. But the next topic is the militia conference here in Anchorage, and you've heard a lot of tapes from that. And that's kind of when Mr. Olson gets really involved in taping. And we know that Francis Schaeffer Cox wanted to show a presence there. You've seen the flyer. His name's on the flyer as actually a presenter, I believe. But the night before the conference, his wife had a baby, and as a good family man, he stayed home. And so he sent J.R. Olson, and the only other person that he could come up with, a warm body, Lonnie Vernon. Lonnie wasn't scheduled to go. Lonnie, you've heard from Les Zerby, was not a part of the command staff. You've heard that from Gary Brockman. He's low man on the totem pole, but he was available, so Francis Schaeffer Cox sends him down. And you heard from J.R. Olson, he didn't want to send Lonnie. Now you got to think, all right, well, why? Well, we've heard a lot about Lonnie. Lonnie is lying. You've heard that from J.R. Olson, and you heard it from Coleman Barney. Lonnie gets excited. And when Lonnie gets excited, Lonnie spouts off. He embellishes, he rants, he raves. You've heard it on the tape. It is what it is. It's just Lonnie being Lonnie. And that's what happens here. He's in a car with J.R. Olson driving from Fairbanks to Anchorage. Mr. Olson thinks it only takes about 4 hours or so, but we all know it takes a little more in the winter particularly. And he's talking about everything. He's talking about space aliens landing. He's talking about the government selling young children to China. He's talking about the Chinese in Idaho. He's talking about tunnels from New Jersey to New Mexico. He's talking about making laser-guided rockets out of microwave ovens. Lonnie is being Lonnie. So now before he leaves, he and J.R. Olson go to Francis Schaeffer Cox's home, and he gives them instructions. One of those instructions was, get as many pineapples as you can. We've heard that. We heard it on the tape. Can't dispute it. It is there. Pineapples meaning pineapple bodies. We've seen them. Perfectly legal to buy. Our CSA guy bought them on the internet. He doesn't tell either of them, and listen to the tape, so you think he's talking to. Is he talking to Lonnie or is he talking to JR? Lonnie pops up and says, oh yeah, maybe we can put phosphorus in them. Well, where did that come from? He doesn't tell them where to get them or how to arrange them, how to pay for them, how much he would expend for them. Just get as many as you can. He doesn't tell them to get C4. There's a conversation about it, but he doesn't tell them to do that. And so they come down to Anchorage. Oh, let me back up a little bit. He tells them, stay away from Bill Fulton. If Bill Fulton is drinking, stay away from him because he gets nuts and violent when he's drinking. Don't have anything to do with him. We don't want that reputation. So what's the first thing they do when they get down there? They go to drop zone and see Bill Fulton. 5 minutes later, after that, Lonnie asks him for the grenade bodies. And that becomes pretty much the joke of the whole weekend. I think Bill Fulton on the tape says time and time again, hey, you don't ask somebody for grenade bodies 5 minutes after you meet them. I don't know you. And everybody laughs. Everybody laughs at Lonnie. But Lonnie is just being Lonnie. And then right after they tell Lonnie not to talk about grenades, then Lonnie says, oh, I've got an MP5 automatic weapon, or my wife does, one or the other. And Bill Fulton again says, whoa, you can't be saying things like that. All the conversations about the hand grenade bodies, there is never an agreement reached. How many can you get me? Can you deliver them on this date? I'll pay you this much money. How are you going to send them to me? And then out of the blue, you heard it in the government's opening, Mr. Vernon says, what about some suppressors? Schaeffer Francis Cox never said anything about getting suppressors. That is just Lonnie. And Bill Fulton said, well, if you want, I believe Lonnie said, I want a suppressor for my SIG, which is the firearm that the government has been showing you. And Bill Fulton said, well, I need to know, the barrel twist. And Lonnie said, I'll just bring it to you. No, Bill Fulton says, no, I don't want to see your gun. Just tell me what it is. Well, he doesn't know, so they leave it at that. And these are audio and video that you've seen. And there was a good bit of drinking done that night. I think you'll see on the tape there's a bottle of wine, there's a bottle of whiskey. They're talking about running out of the beer, and it's just kind of drunk talk. Guys in a hotel room trying to one-up each other, basically. But there is no real negotiation with regard to hand grenades, and the topic of the silencer is all Mr. Vernon. So I think We're about to maybe the second week or so in February, and we're almost done. So when Mr. Vernon and J.R. Olson return to from their trip, again, another 6 hour trip, which I'm sure was full of entertaining topics, Lonnie Vernon goes home. But where does J.R. Olson go? J.R. Olson goes to meet with Francis Schaeffer Cox to report on the progress, to report on what happened down at the militia meeting. Doesn't want to hear from Mr. Vernon. He wants to hear from Mr. Olson. And that's the Super Bowl meeting, the one that was not recorded. And I believe that was on the 6th. So we don't hear anything else about Lonnie Vernon. And then on the 12th, heard a lot about the 12th. The 12th is the meeting in Ken Thessing's bus. Francis Schaeffer Cox is there. Of course Ken Thessing is there. Mr. Barney's there. J.R. Olson's there, and it's recorded. It's a command staff meeting of the militia. Who's not there? Who's not invited? Who's not part of the command staff? Lonnie Vernon. And that's what they talk about. And that's when they talk about the 241 plan. He's not there. He knows nothing about it. Next is the 14th. The 14th is the day that Francis Schaeffer Cox was supposed to show up for his weapons misconduct charge in state court. And he goes to Lonnie Vernon's house. Why? We don't know. Probably the only person that would take him. And you'll hear in a recording where J.R. Olson is trying to bring up the 241, and he even says 241, we need a name for this plan. Lonnie Vernon starts talking about a John Wayne movie and how they can name it. I forgot Bravo or something. He doesn't know what they're talking about. If you listen closely, a lot of times when Lonnie Vernon is joining into a conversation, his comments don't really follow the conversation, and they don't make a lot of sense. He's kind of off on his own. It's Lonnie being Lonnie. And just like Mr. Barney told you, just like J.R. Olson told you, so from the 14th, and the government wants you to tell you their talk about a weapons cache over in North Pole, that he and Mr. Vernon and Francis Schaeffer Cox talked about this weapons cache. Well, I would direct you to the tape recording on the 17th where Lonnie says, well, yeah, there's a weapons cache, but I really don't know where it is, and I don't know what's in it. He doesn't know. He's not a trusted friend of Francis Schaeffer Cox. So they don't tell him. He knows it's there somewhere, and the government may show you a little. I'm bad with measurements, but probably 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch little post-it that was found in Mr. Vernon's wife's calendar was stuck on the back side of it. In fact, let me see if we can do this. 10432. The dishonorable, deaf and dumb, senile judge, dishonorable court. Counsel, we need to take a break. The afternoon up again. Let's take a short break, folks. Only about 5 minutes this time. All rise. This matters in recess for 5 minutes. 402 to 413. Jury not present. The clerk, all rise. His dishonorable court. This dishonorable United States District Court is again in session. The dishonorable court. Please be seated. What are we looking at? I got an eye on the clock here. What are we looking at? Judge, I think it'll take us to 5 o'clock. I think I'll take us to 5 o'clock. Oh, really? Yeah. You know that leaves you with, Miss Hayden, I know, rebuttal first thing in the morning, but that's what we have. The dishonorable court. Rebuttal first thing in the morning, but that's what we have. Okay, let's bring the jury in. Jury present at 4:15. The court. All right, you may continue. Miss Hayden, thank you, Your Honor. And am I good for sound? The clerk, yes. Miss Hayden, okay, thank you. I believe when we broke, I was speaking about the fact that on the 17th, when Mr. Vernon was meeting with J.R. Olson, they had a discussion about the supposed weapons cache over in North Pole. And Mr. Vernon, it's on the tape, good? Sorry. Mr. Vernon explained to J.R. that, yeah, it was a weapons cache, but he didn't know exactly where it was and didn't know what was in it. And that's on tape. There's a sticky note, Mr. Johnson, that was found in Karen Vernon's calendar purse, kind of like one of those things you pick up at Hallmark. And the government will probably argue that this is a map to the weapons cache, but because you know it was off Broadway and Tracy. But what I would submit to you is, number one, this is in Miss Vernon's purse, not Lonnie Vernon's. We don't know who wrote it. We don't know when it was placed there. We don't know why. And if you look at the bottom, it references Marty, not Schaefer. So we don't know what it's for. But we do know that Mr. Vernon is on the tape saying, I don't know where it is, and I don't know what's in there. And that was the conversation on the 17th. Let's back up just a little bit. Want to talk about Michael Anderson a little bit. Heard a lot about Michael Anderson, Lonnie Vernon. I believe the testimony from Mr. Anderson was that he had seen Lonnie Vernon maybe once every 4-5 months at different meetings, Alaska Assembly Post, Interior Coalition meetings, things like that. He would see him maybe once every 4 or 5 months in the social settings. And that was only contact that he had with him. Now on the 17th, again, this is a tape conversation. J.R. Olson has tried to get his so-called list, and it's not a list. Michael Anderson didn't call it a list. He's got on a public site that probably any 6-year-old could do. It's the Alaska Resource Site. And he types in names and he pulls up your property plates. It's not secret. It takes no skill. And then once he pulls up the information, if you own a property, it also, I think, pulls up UCC filing. He can probably run it on the Alaska court system. If you have any civil cases or criminal cases, your name probably comes up. It's all public information. And all you have to do is put the site and put in the name. And then he pulls up the screen. He saves it. Prior to the 17th, although there might be some mention of it on the 14th, again, I believe it's one of those conversations that Mr. Vernon is not very responsive in his comments, probably doesn't understand what the conversation is. But on the 17th, Michael Anderson on tape says Michael Olson has this list. Or excuse me, Michael Anderson has this list. We need to get it from him. And if you listen, Mr. Vernon goes, huh, what? He has a list? He has a list of everybody? Oh, it's like he's hearing this for the first time. We've got to get this list. And in that conversation, the tape is very short portion of the conversation. I believe Michael Anderson says 4 or 5 times, we've got to get this list. We've got to get this list. We've got to get this list. Mr. Vernon says, oh, okay. Well, I'll try to. We'll try to do that. Michael Anderson testified that he never talked to Lonnie Vernon about the list. Lonnie Vernon never came to his house, and Lonnie Vernon never called him. If you look at the document that came out of Michael Anderson's home, which is 50409, if you could, Mr. Johnson, just highlight the upper portion there, government showed you just this document in their argument. And up at the top, it gives 2 numbers for the Vernons, and then it says paperwork from the Vernons. When Michael Anderson testified, he said, I don't know why I had the Vernons phone numbers. Okay, I'm going to stop on page 146. Page 146.
This is Global Telway.
Alright, I'm going to pick back up at page 146. Just this document in their argument, and up at the top it gives 2 numbers for the Vernons, and it says paperwork from the Vernons. When Michael Anderson testified, and he said, I don't know why I had the Vernons phone numbers, I never called them. I don't know why it said on there paperwork from the Vernons. I don't know what that's about. Lonnie Vernon had nothing to do with that, indiscernible. Other than JR prompting him to try to get it, which he did not follow through on. Takes us up to the 19th of February. We're getting close. 19th of February is when Mr. Vernon and his wife met at Coleman Barney's house. Mr. Vernon may had an agenda. Schaefer Cox had been living with him since the 14th, and he wasn't very happy about it. And you heard that recording, and he says, I'm done with you. I've got my own problems. I've got stuff I've got to do. He's talking about his IRS case. My wife has to work. We've got deadlines. You're out in my yard. You're making noise. Your kid's running around. You should have gone to court. You should have showed up. You got to go. And sure enough, Francis Schaefer Cox, Jr., drives him back over to Vernon's house, picks up his belongings, and he's out. There's no evidence that Lonnie Vernon had any further contact after the 19th with Francis Schaefer Cox. It was done. Now on the 22nd, 3 days later, Mr. Vernon gets a call from Jr. This is weeks since they've been down here in Anchorage. And JR says, hey, you know those things that we were asking Bill Fulton about? I can get them, silencers. And I'm not quite sure whether in that conversation he mentions hand grenades or not, but it's all on tape. That's the 22nd. No discussion with Francis Schaefer Cox about the silencers or the hand grenades. No discussion with Coleman Barney about hand grenades. Mr. Vernon may have mentioned, hey, you know that, I might be picking up a silencer, but no agreement between the two of them to possess a silencer. And so from there we go to the arrest, and you've seen the video. Let me talk to you just a few minutes about what Mr. Vernon is charged with and what he's not charged with. He's charged in 2 conspiracies. Conspiracy to possess destructive devices, being hand grenades, hornet's nest, and silencer. You've heard the judge's instruction. It has to be an agreement. Not with JR, not with Mr. Fulton, but with one of these gentlemen. It didn't happen. There's no agreement. He's acting on his own. And in fact, you heard from Special Agent Westerhouse that he put in an affidavit that when Mr. Vernon was trying to purchase a silencer, that he was not doing it in relation to the militia or the Alaska Assembly Post. He had his own personal reasons, no conspiracy. And I would submit that that applies to the grenade as well. And if you review that tape, he's surprised. He's like, wow, are these flashbangs? Are these smoke grenades? He didn't know what he was getting. J.R. Olson shows up and he's got them. He's not charged with purchasing the silencer. He's not charged with possessing the silencer. He's not charged with purchasing the grenades, and he's not charged with possessing the grenades. He's only charged with conspiracy to obtain them, and that's agreement. He's not charged with any illegal weapons violations. We heard about a little blasting cap that you would take down stumps or something with. That was found in his home. He's not charged with that. He's charged with conspiracy to murder federal officials. Now I ask you, when you hear that, that's a very serious sounding thing. What would you expect the government to present as far as evidence on that? Some type of plan? We're going to do it here, we're going to do it there, we're going to be over here, and we're going to be over there, and we're at least going to have real people, not fictitious FBI agents that may or may not show up. Now, following Mr. Vernon's arrest, you heard about a search of his home. Well, let me talk about what they didn't find in his house. As far as destructive devices. Can you enlarge that one? No. Okay. You'll let me read it to you then, because I don't think you can see it from here. But destructive devices, they found no grenade bodies, no grenade launcher, no black powder, no smokeless powder, no JB Weld, no OC and SC or CS canisters, no OS grenades, no Hornet's Nest, no tap kit, no phosphorus. He was like talking about Francis Schaeffer Cox. No fuses. They also found no thumb cuffs, no handcuffs, no police belt, no ASP baton, no radios, no silencer, no materials to make a silencer, no 35mm with a Hornet's Nest, no full auto MP5 like he had told Bill Fulton he had, no C4, and the evidence shows no illegal firearms. Furthermore, he had no bomb-making cookbooks like he had talked about. No monthly militia reports like he was supposed to be filing out as a sergeant. No lockpick kit. This is a big one. No color-coded phone. And when you look at the list of who had the color-coded phones, Lonnie Vernon is not there. Why? Because he's not part of the command staff. He wasn't in the in crowd. They're not calling him. No red phone, no yellow phone, no green phone, no Twitter account. Remember when 241 is supposed to happen? You're supposed to Twitter Francis Schaeffer Cox and find out what you're supposed to do. Lonnie Vernon doesn't Twitter or tweet or whatever. Also in the house you found no guided laser rockets made from microwaves. So let me back up just a minute to the arrest. Mr. Johnson, if I could get 798, and why don't we just go ahead and go to the second page, and if you could blow that up. This is the letter. There were several, all the same, just addressed differently, found in the Vernon's vehicle at the time of the arrest. The government's calling it their suicide letter or their goodbye letter. Take a good look at this, and you'll have it back in the jury room. The letter is about their fight with the IRS. It's not about the militia. It's not about Schaeffer Cox. It's not about any of his causes. It's about their frustration and their fight and their fear of the IRS. So now I have to bore you with a little bit of law. You heard Mr. Dooley speak on this briefly, but it has to do with the burden of proof. In the legal system, there are different burdens of proof, going from less to more pretty much. Reasonable suspicion is way down on the scale. Reasonable suspicion is what a law enforcement officer has to have if they're going to stop your vehicle maybe. They think that you're doing something wrong, maybe DWI or speeding or whatever. They have to have reasonable suspicion. It's a very low standard. Up from there is a standard called probable cause. Probable cause, you heard this from Special Agent Westerhouse, probable cause is what a judge has to find before law enforcement can search your house. If they're applying for a warrant, you have to have probable cause, a little bit more. Above that is a standard called preponderance of the evidence, and that's the general standard that's used in civil cases. And it's kind of like more probable than not, 51%, and that is something called clear and convincing. If you have an issue with OCS, Office of Child Services, that's the standard that they must employ before they take action. It's pretty high. It's more than 50%, 51%. In criminal cases, in order to convict somebody, you must find them guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the highest standard in our system. And it's difficult to explain what it is, but let me just throw some things out there for you. You've heard all the evidence and you're convinced that he's proven not guilty. No doubt about it, just not guilty. Okay, then you vote not guilty. Next up, you think it's highly unlikely he's guilty, and you think it's less likely that he's guilty. He's still not guilty. Above that, if you think it's unlikely that he's guilty, and you think he's probably not guilty, you still must vote not guilty. If you think it's possible he's not guilty, or he might not be guilty, it still doesn't reach the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. If you think I really don't know if he's guilty or not, perhaps he's guilty, still not beyond a reasonable doubt. Going on up, I suspect he may be guilty. I think he's possibly guilty. That's not beyond a reasonable doubt. I think he's probably guilty. Guilty is likely. Guilty is highly likely. This is still not beyond a reasonable doubt. Definitely guilty is beyond a reasonable doubt. And that is the standard you must apply in this case. Now that concludes my comments, but I just have one thing left to say to you. And that's because the government does have the burden of proof. They get to speak again. And you won't hear from me again. And they're probably going to say some things and they're probably going to have some things to say. And I just want you to think about whatever they say, how I would have responded to it, because I don't get a chance to speak to you again. I appreciate your patience. I know it's been a long week, and thank you very much. The dishonorable court, deaf and dumb judge, Robert J. Bryan. Serpent Scrocky, give me a guess as to the time for rebuttal. Serpent Scrocky got 40 to 45. The dishonorable court. Well, I think it follows that we should probably recess for the evening and do that in the morning. I don't want to keep the jury here that late. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time goes on where we are at more critical. You see how Scrocky gets a whole day to prepare rebuttal? This is absurd. He's going to have a whole day to take everything that he listened to and prepare immaculate arguments on the next day, and they don't get a chance to rebut it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the dishonorable, deaf and dumb judge, Robert J. Bryan. Dishonorable court. Ladies and gentlemen, as time goes on, we are at a more critical times in the course of the trial, and it's particularly important that you follow my instructions that I've given you over and over. They're still important. Don't discuss the case with each other or anyone else. Don't review or listen to any news accounts. Don't do any independent research about any of the matters you've heard discussed in court. Keep your minds open on all issues, and bear in mind that you've not heard anything yet, and you have not had the opportunity to discuss what you have heard and will hear with the other jurors. So it would be unfair for you to come to conclusions until you've heard everything, and you've not heard everything yet. Come back tomorrow at 8:30 and we will continue with the final argument and submit the case for your decision. So you may be excused. Jury not present at 4:40 p.m. The dishonorable court. Denali, if the jury goes while everybody's getting things set in the jury room with the exhibits, does the jury have a place in where they report in the morning where they can work together privately? The clerk, if you want them, you want them to be able to start deliberations down there. Well, you said it might take an hour to. The clerk, yeah. The dishonorable court, get the exhibits in there. The clerk, I can probably put them in a different deliberation room to start and then move them back into 2. The dishonorable court, okay. The clerk, when the evidence is in there. The dishonorable court, deaf and dumb judge Robert J. Bryan. All right, well, let's plan on doing that so they don't have to wait while we're getting the evidence set up. There are other things. Please be seated. There are other things that we're going to have to talk about in the morning. One is any agreements that you may have reached regarding playing back stuff on the computer or whatever. We talked about this a little bit last night, and I want to be sure you're all in agreement on whatever we plan to do about a machine in there for them. And also, when the exhibit goes into the jury room, I expect that all counsel will do whatever you think is necessary to check those exhibits, because if there's a mistake made and you didn't check them, I'm not likely to hear your complaint about it. I'll take that as a waiver if you haven't checked the exhibits as they go in. We also talked about filing the transcripts that were played to the jury, recordings that were played to the jury as court's exhibit, not to go to the jury. And at this point, I've got a bunch of them here and a little confused about what was and what was not played to the jury. And so I want your input on what exhibit should consist of, so that's something else we have to do tomorrow when the jury goes out. Okay, we'll reconvene for the next day tomorrow at 8:30. The clerk, all rise. The matter is in recess until tomorrow at 8:30. This dishonorable court is adjourned, subject to call. That was page 155.